Chapter 31. Come, let me see what tricks you still have up your sleeve. The next second, a large group of people suddenly appeared on the rooftop of Mutual Entertainment KTV, and three massive searchlights shone directly into the room where Chen Yi and his companions were hiding. The blinding light exposed the Tuberculosis Rabbit, who had been concealed in the darkness, for all to see. Right after that, a bald man with his upper body bare arrogantly pulled out a megaphone and burst into loud laughter. Ha 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 ha! Stop hiding, come on out! Chen Yi looked at the props in his backpack, which had turned grey, along with the skills on his personal panel that were also greyed out, and after a moment of silence, he slowly walked out from cover and stood beside the floor-to-ceiling window, facing the piercing light as he looked towards the source. He couldn't see those people, but he could hear their voices. Surprise, isn't it? The bald man stood on the rooftop of Mutual Entertainment KTV, taking a cigar passed to him by a subordinate and putting it in his mouth, confidently staring down Chen Yi. I thought someone who achieved what you have would have some brains. But it turns out you're really quite stupid. Didn't you think that someone who could build up Yanshan's Mutual Entertainment KTV to this scale could be a fool? Would I, like an idiot, send someone to provoke you brainlessly before I fully understood your background? Foolish. It was all just to lure you here, because this arena prop can only be used in this place. I had to draw you here. I know, you want to know how I found you. Because when the arena is semi-activated, it can obtain the exact coordinates of the player being declared war on in real time. Your movements were really quite conspicuous in my eyes. After saying all this, the bald man somewhat reluctantly ordered his men to turn off the spotlight and look towards Chen Yi and his companions standing in front of the office building's floor-to-ceiling window. Don't you have anything to say? You can try begging for mercy, or flatter my intelligence a bit. If I'm in a good mood, maybe I won't kill you. Although killing you to take your props is indeed tempting. But if you're willing to hand over your props voluntarily, that would be even better. After all, you know killing a player only has a high chance of dropping some props, and there are always losses. Oh right, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Lu Yishao. I always hold something back in whatever I do, so don't even think about having a chance to escape. If I don't get an answer within 3 minutes, then this game of cat and mouse is going to start. I have over 30 men here, and you can't use props or skills. Do you think you two ordinary people can beat my gang of thugs behind me? Chen Yi stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window without speaking, his expression calm as he took out a cigarette from his chest pocket, lit it, and through the faint blue smoke, he looked at the bald man. And the young man they had encountered once before, who was now grinning malevolently and gesturing a cutthroat with his hand. With a soft sigh, he muttered. Consider this a lesson, that before doing anything in the future, one must thoroughly investigate the other party's background. Yi. Tuberculosis Rabbit, with a look of urgency and ferocity, picked up a steel table leg from the floor beside him and was forcefully hitting it on the ground to sharpen its end. He spoke hastily. I know this is a lesson, but right now we need to get ready with whatever weapons we can find. I'll use this table leg, and I'll give you my claw knife, Yi. We can't use its special effects, but it can still be used as a knife. Staking our lives might give us a chance, otherwise, there won't be an afterward. No. Chen Yi slightly shook his head and flicked the half-smoked cigarette from his mouth to the side, calmly saying, the lesson isn't learned from our own experiences, but from those on the other side. The next second, 2 streaks of lightning, like thunder snakes, began to surge wildly in Chen Yi's eyes. They were so glaring in the darkness. Immediately after, Tuberculosis Rabbit hadn't even had time to react before a noble yellow, semi-translucent staircase suddenly appeared before them, shattering the floor-to-ceiling window into pieces. The staircase then rapidly extended toward the rooftop of Mutual Entertainment KTV with an uncatchable speed. It was just a blink of an eye. A noble yellow, semi-translucent staircase, like a sky ladder, appeared between the two buildings, hanging in mid-air, incredibly eye-catching. But it wasn't over yet. Chen Yi's hand suddenly held a Christmas cane, and a red-patterned light circle with a diameter of 2 meters appeared beneath his feet. Title: Violators, Annihilate 9 clans. Special effects activated. Right after, a crimson frozen throne slowly emerged from the red-patterned light circle. The moment Chen Yi sat down, an ear-splitting, blood-tinged, aged voice filled everyone's ears in the arena, like 3D surround sound, suddenly erupting. Let me personally tell you, when everything is over, you will beg for my forgiveness, and I will deny you. A twitch involuntarily flickered across Chen Yi's icy face. He knew that activating the blood-red frozen throne had special effects and had checked what those were. But he hadn't expected that the special effects would also include an entrance BGM. Such a Chiyunabihu-style catchphrase was truly hard to keep a straight face. The next second, nearly 100 heavily armored soldiers, wielding sharp blades, emerged from the shadows behind Chen Yi. They stepped in unison onto the sky ladder and boldly advanced towards the rooftop of Mutual Entertainment KTV. And this was the special effect that came with his title. For the cost of 10 points, he could summon a heavily armored soldier to fight for him. This effect could only be used when the Crimson Frozen Throne was summoned. 100 or so heavily armored soldiers were just 1,000 or so points, just a trifle for him at this moment. Props and skills could no longer be used. But the special effects associated with the title could still be activated normally. The opponent in the arena had indeed become an ordinary player, but he had not. Don't think that the 5 titles above his head were just for show. After doing all this, Chen Yi, with a sense of remaining vigor, looked to his empty sides. Having become accustomed to the light pollution, he even felt the special effects were somewhat lacking. There should be a pair of huge, multicolored wings on both sides at this moment. Better yet, the kind with light swirling and dancing around the wings. 1 word. Expensive. 2 words. Luxuriously expensive. Only then did he raise his head to look at the group of people on the rooftop of Mutual Entertainment KTV, who were frozen in place with eyes full of terror, and he began to smirk. Lu Yishao, right. Come, let me see what other tricks you've got up your sleeve. Chapter 32. Do not fail to do something just because it is small, do not. As he spoke, he seamlessly continued with the thunder snake lightning effects in his eyes. The title effect offered no enhancement to his combat ability. But its advantage was the lack of a cooldown, allowing it to be used continuously. With the mindset why not use it if it's free? He casually renewed his Thunder Eye special effects. Yi, this. The Tuberculosis Rabbit by his side looked towards Chen Yi sitting on the Crimson Frozen Throne, mouth slowly agape, and after a long while, murmured. This is absolutely ridiculous. The scene before them. It left the talkative Tuberculosis Rabbit somewhat at a loss for words, not knowing how to express his emotions. Meanwhile, Chen Yi, in good spirits, sat upon the frozen throne and chuckled as he looked towards the crowd on the opposite rooftop, their expressions filled with terror and ferocity as they picked up their weapons, ready to fight to the death. Fight then. Even if he were to lose this batch of heavily armored soldiers, he could instantly summon another batch. Just 1800 points, he wasn't short on such a trivial amount of points now. Brother. Lu Yishao, holding his great sword high, slowly backed away, his lips trembling as he yelled, Don't be rash, let's talk about this peacefully. Let's sit down and talk first. He had never expected, with props and skills being restricted, how Chen Yi could conjure up so many things. It was illogical. Unscientific. But now he had no time to ponder that question, as 100 heavily armored soldiers were already advancing up the sky ladder towards them. A battle was about to break out. No. More accurately, a slaughter was about to commence. The heavily armored soldiers charged into the crowd, completely ignoring the machetes falling upon them, merely swinging their blades and sending these enforcers flying aside. And the machetes striking the soldiers did nothing, completely unable to breach their defense. They only produced clangs of steel upon steel, with the added sparks making the scene even more desolate. In just a short minute's time, the enforcers following Lu Yishao had all fallen to the ground with severe injuries, unable to rise. There were those who pleaded for mercy, but these heavily armored soldiers didn't have their own consciousness. They couldn't understand pleas for mercy. Kneeling on the ground didn't elicit sympathy from the soldiers, on the contrary, it made it easier for them to keep chopping. 1 strike per person, crisp and clean. Lu Yishao's face filled with despair as he lay in a pool of blood, looking at the heavily armored soldiers surrounding him, his eyes brimming with hopelessness and unwillingness. He was somewhat resentful. The obstacles he had overcome on his journey were countless, and he had managed to get through all of them. So why had he fallen here today? And without any power to resist? Just then, the soldiers encircling him suddenly stepped aside and gradually dissolved, and he saw the man stepping up the sky ladder with 5 title icons floating above his head, slowly walking towards him. Hope flashed through Lu Yishao's eyes, and he tucked away his resentment. He instantly got up, knelt in place, and bowing continuously towards Chen Yi, he said with a trembling voice. Brother! I, Lu Yishao, have been making my way in Yancheng for so long, I'm somewhat clever and strong. Don't kill me, I'll follow you from now on. My men will be at your disposal from now on, too. The situation will become increasingly severe in the future, having a group of people is always good. From now on, you're our boss, and we swear to be loyal to you unto death. Brothers, wouldn't you agree? The enforcers lying injured on the ground, who still had the strength to speak, mustered their last bit of energy, enduring the pain to shout, yes. And at this moment, Chen Yi had just walked up to the rooftop of Mutual Entertainment KTV along the sky ladder, leaning on the Christmas cane with one hand, stepping on a red light ring, his face filled with sentiment as he looked down at these people on the ground. Don't do it because it's a small kindness. Chen Yi hadn't finished speaking when a thicker hope sparked in Lu Yishao's eyes, his face excited, nodding continuously with contempt hidden deep in his gaze. Right, don't commit a small evil either. Brother's perspective is admirable, it was us who offended you at the start. Chen Yi, with a slightly odd look, glanced at Lu Yishao lying on the ground and said with a faint voice, the rest of the saying is actually, don't give up on a small advantage. Seems like you're a bit lacking in your repository of poems and verses. Tuberculosis Rabbit, bring them together, I'll tell them a ghost story, and you work on some real-time special effects on the side. Sure thing. Half an hour later, Chen Yi, with a satisfied expression, clapped his hands together and looked at the treasure box that appeared in front of him, smiling happily. This is also making the best use of things. Special event, Reincarnation Treasure Box. When the number of people who die in one location due to breaking the May rules reaches over 10, there's a certain probability this event will be triggered. Lucky, the event had been successfully triggered. Maintaining a state of zero fear, one can open the treasure box 100% of the time, and the rewards will be a critical hit. Just like last time. 10,000 points in the bag. His current points balance is 230,209, with just the live stream contributing 216,000 points. Plus, he still had 970,000 kill points left unspent. These points could be exchanged for rewards in the Extraterrestrial Invader event. Furthermore, points could be exchanged for points, at a 1:1 ratio. He had planned to find a safe place after returning to Yancheng to deal with all these points, but his time was delayed a bit by these people from Mutual Entertainment KTV. However, it was good that it was all settled now. The moment this group of people died, the arena's light circle also dissipated. Chen Yi casually glanced downstairs, suddenly felt something was off, furrowed his brows and looked at the watch on his wrist, then he realized. He had been in the arena for nearly an hour. And in the outside world, only a second had passed. Does this mean when the arena opened, the outside time was paused? To say that seemed a bit illogical, it was more like when the arena opened, they were thrown out of the timeline, and only after the arena ended were they thrown back into this moment in time. Tuberculosis Rabbit also seemed to realize something, thoughtfully nodding his head. In that case, no matter how many crises this game has, humans will never go extinct. Why? Think about it, Yi, when humans face a crisis, just collect 1,000 arena props, then stock up on food and water resources, and allocate 1,000 strong men and 1,000 beautiful women to each arena. Let these people have children inside. After 100 years in the arena, only a few seconds will have passed in the outside world. Once the 1,000 arenas are done, hundreds of thousands of youths can return to the battlefield with them. And thus, the cycle of life will continue endlessly. Chen Yi looked at Tuberculosis Rabbit a bit speechlessly, then proceeded to take all the skill fragments and props from the corpses next to them. He left the place quietly. If nothing unexpected happened, he should be making another trip here. After all, when the Law Enforcement Bureau discovered this place, they would still need him to come over to collect the bodies, and then he could make another profit. He could also settle the 3,000 points from last time at the movie theater. They say the best side job for a forensic investigator is being a hitman. Earning money from the employer as a hitman at night. Dissecting the very people killed the night before to earn a salary by day. And it's uncertain if the salary system for forensic medicine is based on a piecework basis. Chapter 33. The children will like this vehicle. Chen Yi returned to his rented apartment in Yancheng. Downstairs in the residential complex, he already saw numerous posters plastered in the announcement board. They were generally recruitment notices for some people to go to the edge of Yanchinj to build defensive structures. The salary was quite good. 3 points per day. And this information had almost completely eliminated the circulation of cash. The state had stepped in and begun transactions with points, thus cash had completely lost its purpose. Starting from today, points would become the official currency in circulation. The night had already fallen. But the complex was unusually bustling tonight, with many people gathering around, discussing animatedly. From the topics of their discussions, it was clear that everyone had realized something. That was, hiding all the time might not solve the problems anymore. One must become stronger to have a sense of security. And when Chen Yi arrived, everyone shut their mouths instantaneously, their expressions slightly tense, and their eyes filled with a mix of fear and respect as they watched Chen Yi walk away. Once Chen Yi was far away, the crowd started to discuss animatedly once again. Is it really him alone who killed all the monsters outside Yanchinj? Isn't that obvious? Haven't you seen the title above his head, Invincible Under the Heavens? Currently, only Chen Yi has that title, right? Who knows how strong he is now? That, no one knows, but the title Annihilate 9 Clans makes one feel slightly apprehensive to approach him. It's my first time realizing Chen Yi lives in our complex. So, from another point of view, is our place not one of the safest in Yanchinj? As the words fell, all exchanged glances, understanding the message in each other's eyes. Chen Yi first set aside the props he had found on Lu Yishao, sighing regretfully that he hadn't found the arena prop he wanted. That prop would have been perfect for him. With it, he could basically do as he pleased. But it hadn't dropped. He wasn't sure if it was a one-time use prop or for some other reason. In any case, it hadn't dropped. He had found 4 props on Lu Yishao and the others, which were some life props with not very powerful effects. Only one prop was a bit interesting. Prop name, a small and cute plum. Prop level, E-level prop. Prop effect, when you are in an extremely hungry and thirsty state, just one glance will make the feeling of hunger and thirst instantly disappear, with no cooldown, and it can be used repeatedly. Prop restrictions, it can only eliminate psychological hunger and thirst, not the physical state of hunger and thirst. Prop introduction, the hunger and thirst referred to here are solely in the literal sense. It's a pretty good prop for survival in the wilderness. Being able to not feel hunger and thirst when lacking food and water is beneficial, but the downside is significant. With repeated use, it's very possible to die of hunger and thirst even without feeling it. Then he took a deep breath and opened the points store with eager anticipation. 970,000 points, that was basically the total number of points a city could get. He wanted to see if there were any good items. The first thing that caught his eye were the skill fragments. E-level random skill fragment X1, 5 points. E-level universal skill fragment X1, 50 points. From E-level to C-level skill fragments, there was a complete range. Right now, his urgent task was to exchange for some defensive skills or props to prevent being shot in the back. He glanced at his personal panel with slight hesitation. He currently had 2 skills. One was a D-grade skill Calm and Composed, and the other a C-grade skill Annihilate 9 Clans. Each player could equip a maximum of 8 skills. Once equipped, it could not be removed. If removed, it would be lost forever and could not be re-equipped. In other words, if he removed the Calm and Composed skill from his skill slot, the skill would disappear from his backpack, and he would not be able to equip it again in the future. Killing players might drop certain items randomly, but skills would not drop. Therefore, he had to be cautious every time he equipped a skill, to avoid a situation in the future where he ran out of skill slots and had to painfully part with one. He felt somewhat reluctant to part with either of these 2 skills. Calm and Composed may be low level, but it could permanently enhance his physical fitness. As for Annihilate 9 Clans, there was no need to say more. Whether he was slaying monsters or exterminating threats, it was exceptionally useful. He turned his attention to the C-grade universal skill fragment in the store. C-grade universal skill fragment X1, 20,000 points. Seeing the price of this item, Chen Yi's mouth twitched slightly, but he said nothing. What does 20,000 points mean? An ordinary person would only earn 1 point for killing an insect race monster, meaning they would need to kill 20,000 monsters just to exchange for a C-grade skill fragment. The difficulty was not small. The price for a C-grade random skill fragment X1 was much cheaper, requiring only 2,000 points, which was a full 10 times less expensive than the universal skill fragment of the same level. There should be a trading platform, Chen Yi said without speaking. The tuberculosis rabbit by his side licked its lips with some emotion and said, everyone could put the skill fragments they don't need on the platform and then trade for the skill fragments they do need. It's possible to pay a little extra in points, but it's definitely much cheaper than buying universal skill fragments directly from the store. Chen Yi nodded in agreement without speaking. Tuberculosis Rabbit's words were not wrong. But to establish such a platform, a good reputation and the ability to quickly transport skill fragments to other cities were needed. So far, it seemed the only entity capable of doing this was the nation itself. As for whether the game would release such a feature, he was not optimistic. If they were going to implement this feature, they wouldn't have priced the universal skill fragment so much higher than the random skill fragment. Right now, he had 8 different C-grade skill fragments in his hand, all rewards from the last event, and each was just in a quantity of 1. Looking at it this way, the rewards from that last 520 limited time event were quite generous. By killing a Cupid and achieving number 1 on the kill ranking, one could obtain C-grade random skill fragment X10, C-grade universal skill fragment X3. Converted into points, that was nearly a 100,000 points reward. Difficulty-wise, securing top damage against Cupid was much easier than killing 100,000 monsters. This was almost no different from his guess. The 520 limited time event was a welfare event with generous rewards, allowing players not to be powerless against the extraterrestrial invader event. That day, Yanqing must have spawned nearly a dozen Cupids. Then, he continued scrolling through the points store, first taking a general look at everything, before considering what he needed to buy. The next second, his gaze stopped on a particular item. Vehicle name, Mechanical Moose Christmas Sleigh. Vehicle level, C-grade vehicle. Vehicle effect, can accommodate 8 people simultaneously, maximum speed 280 km per hour, capable of low altitude flight, modifiable, consumes 300 points per hour when activated. Vehicle introduction, kids are going to love this vehicle. Vehicle price, 500,000 points. PS, when the first player acquires the vehicle, it will trigger a patch update. The contents of the update will mainly include the following: opening the global vehicle leaderboard, a vehicle modification panel, and more, etc. What attracted him most were the few words of the vehicle's introduction. Kids are going to love this vehicle. The update on May 1 teased that the new rules added after the June update would concern life. And June 1 is Children's Day. This vehicle appeared timely in the Extraterrestrial Invader Points store, coupled with that intriguing vehicle introduction. Really, it's hard not to speculate. Chapter 34. Let's go, I'll take you for a spin. Bye. Chen Yi made the decision to purchase without any hesitation. The price of 500,000 points was indeed very high. To understand, in the current Extraterrestrial Invader event, there were only a mere 1 million insect race monsters outside Yanqing. As for the situation in other cities and in some counties and rural areas, he had no idea. Whether the same number of monsters existed or if the number would decrease with the player population in counties and rural areas was unknown. But no matter the case, gathering 500,000 points was an exceedingly difficult task. On the Extraterrestrial Invader Global Points leaderboard, his ranking was first. As for the second place, they had only 160,000 points. Not even half of his total. Still, that was pretty impressive. To be able to kill 160,000 monsters on one's own in such a short time, they must have some powerful prop or skill. In other words, right now, he was the only person in the world who could afford this prop. He even felt that the project team probably didn't expect anyone could afford this vehicle. It was likely just there in the points store for everyone to take a glance at, just so people knew such a thing would be available in the future. Without any doubt, he looked at the purchase button for the vehicle. The next second. Ding! Player Chen Yi has spent 500,000 points to purchase the C-Class vehicle Mechanical Moose Christmas Sleigh. Immediately after, he saw a prop with a sleigh avatar appear in his backpack. Before he could take a closer look, the sound of a system patch update rang in his ears. Ding! Global announcement. Due to a player obtaining the world's first vehicle, a patch update has been triggered. The following are the contents of this patch update. 1. The global vehicle leaderboard is now active. Vehicles will be ranked based on their vehicle rating, and the top 100 on the leaderboard will receive non-permanent title rewards. 2. All non-prop vehicles globally are now unusable, and the removal of related map debris has begun. 3. The vehicle customization feature is now active. Players can use points or props to customize their vehicles to a certain extent. 4. From now on, opening any gift pack or monster drops will have a chance to yield vehicle props. This announcement resonated in the ears of everyone around the world. Yi. Just then, Tuberculosis Rabbit leaned on the window, looking down at the street below with a shocked and urgent expression. You've got to see this. Chen Yi frowned, walked over to the window, and looked down as well. All he saw were the vehicles that had been causing traffic jams due to chaos, and now those vehicles had all disappeared. Public buses, intercity coaches, shared bikes had all vanished, even children's push scooters had disappeared from the world with the announcement. That map debris removal from the patch update, that was what it meant. Meaning, from now on, people's means of travel would only be their own legs and vehicle props. The entire city seemed somewhat empty and unusually clean. Many pedestrians stood incredulously on the streets, staring at the now empty roads they had just witnessed the disappearance of cars from. It really is thought-provoking. Tuberculosis Rabbit spoke with a complex tone. Once upon a time, everyone was guessing that the end of the shared bikes could be due to the abandonment by capital, due to policy impacts, or because a competitor took over the market. Everyone thought of various possibilities, but no one expected that the end of shared bikes would be so swift and decisive. That saying is indeed correct. What defeats you is often not your competitor, but it's very possible, a patch update announcement. But actually, I'm still a bit saddened about our motorcycle. Chen Yi shook his head, no longer concerned about this matter. Instead, he left the room with Tuberculosis Rabbit and went up to the rooftop. On the rooftop, Chen Yi took out his vehicle from the backpack and activated it. Accompanied by a faint puff of white smoke, it exploded. A C-class vehicle, the mechanical moose Christmas sleigh, officially appeared before their eyes. Before them, an elongated red sleigh with 8 seats suddenly materialized. At the head of the sleigh were 4 pure white mechanical elks, harnessed together to the sled by reins. Tuberculosis Rabbit, curious, walked up to the mechanical elks and touched them up and down, clicking his tongue and saying, "Real leather, these little eyes are also quite pretty when they sparkle. But this thing doesn't even have a canopy, it's not rainproof or windproof, and there are no seat belts. It feels risky." At this moment, Chen Yi took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth, his eyes eagerly fixated on the Christmas sleigh in front of him as he started grinning. "Let's go, I'll take you for a spin. Be careful, drive slowly, Yi." At this time, all over the world, countless people were watching the Global Vehicle Leaderboard before them. Global Vehicle Leaderboard. First place, Chen Yi. Vehicle, Mechanical Moose Christmas Sleigh. Rating, 1000. There was no second place. So far, Chen Yi was the only one to top the Global Vehicle Leaderboard. Gao Yiming stood calmly in the office building, diverting his gaze from the Global Vehicle Leaderboard and looking towards the Christmas sleigh flying above the city. After a long silence, he then spoke softly. "Uncle Wei. It seems Lu Yishao's side has failed." The elder standing in the shadows, his voice weary and hoarse, replied, "People have already been sent to check. Lu Yishao and others died violating the Mei rules. But some of the corpses and flesh bear distinct knife wounds. Chen Yi must have taken advantage of his ability not to fear, creating enough fear, then charged up and took down Lu Yishao and the others. After all, the arena prop we provided for Lu Yishao should have been enough to beat Chen Yi." Sigh. Gao Yiming sighed softly, rubbing his temples with some irritation as he whispered, "Send someone again, still do not expose our identities. If he can't be killed this time, then kill all those who know, and then try to befriend him. An enemy that can't be killed should, if possible, be turned into a friend of the company." "Understood, young master." He had initially planned to capture Chen Yi and use his fearlessness to open the treasure chest. But, after learning that Chen Yi had slain all the monsters outside the city, he changed his mind. How many points could a treasure chest contain? Chen Yi surely had some powerful props on him, like that sniper rifle. If he could get those items, the future would be promising indeed. In their line of work, even before the game arrived, their hands hadn't been free from blood. After all, many times the compensation for a lifetime disability is much higher than for an accidental death. Society has rules, but within those rules, there is also a taste of blood. Chapter 35. Obtain the non-permanent title. Your cars are all super weak. Yancheng, military headquarters. A short old man in a coat put down the satellite phone in his hands and looked at the global vehicle leaderboard before him, his expression dazed. After sitting in the command center and staring blankly for a long time, he couldn't help but shake his head and chuckle to himself. I'm too old, in the end, it's still up to the younger generation to take over the world. Then he picked up a comb from the table and carefully combed what little hair he had left, suddenly breaking into laughter. But I must say, it's quite good to have such characters during these chaotic times. The human race really is lucky, every time there's chaos, someone stands up. He had already discussed with those above, and had reported the opinion of the argumentative old man to them as well. The answer from above was simple. Every man for himself, protect the younglings. It meant that the nation no longer had the ability to protect everyone, advising each city to fend for themselves. The notion of protecting the younglings meant that if any player rose to prominence within the city, they should not harbor any malcontent toward them. If possible, try to incorporate them into the military. This wasn't mandatory, but it was essential not to discipline them with military systems. Instead, form a separate army. Without any system, whose only rule is to kill monsters to protect the rear. He had also passed on his compatriots' ideas, which was that national treasures are only considered national treasures when in the hands of the nation. The response he received about this statement was also weird. He sighed lightly and expertly pressed a button under his desk, prompting the camera in the room to play the previously recorded footage in a loop. He then unbuttoned his shirt, took out a homemade cigar from the breast pocket, lit it, put it in his mouth, crossed his legs, and began to smoke nonchalantly in the chair, devoid of any image. His doctor had expressly told his personal guard that his health was too frail for smoking. It made sense, but he didn't listen. Reclining in the chair, he gazed at the slightly yellowed ceiling through the light blue smoke and suddenly curled a smile on his lips. Props can be taken, but luck can't. That was the response from above. It also meant that those who could rise at this stage were blessed with the luck to protect the human race. A prop could be taken, but the luck they carried could not. Opposing this for too long would surely backfire. What a pain in the ass, and you guys were the ones who said no to feudal superstitions. While almost all the players were looking up at the global vehicle leaderboard with complex and envious expressions, Chen Yi and the Tuberculosis Rabbit were already having a blast riding a snowmobile in the skies above Yancheng. Finally, Chen Yi brought the snowmobile back to the rooftop of his community, happily jumped off, and clapped his hands as he looked at the still shell-shocked Tuberculosis Rabbit with a smile. Not bad, this thing is really fun to ride. Hee hee. The Tuberculosis Rabbit gave a lifeless chuckle, walked stiffly to the edge of the rooftop, paused for a second, then without hesitation bent forward 90 degrees. Blag. Ew. Chen Yi took a few disgusted steps back, then suddenly noticed that a few more lines of text had appeared on the vehicle panel after his purchase. Basic score, 1000 points. P.S. On December 25th, Christmas Day, this vehicle can be flown all day without any consumption, and special effects will be activated. Basic score wasn't interesting to look at. But the last point was intriguing. On Christmas Day, the vehicle would trigger special effects, though it was unknown what the effects would be. However, it made sense for the Christmas sleigh to have some effects on Christmas Day. As long as it didn't involve him playing Santa Claus and delivering gifts stuffed in stockings to children. Chen Yi abruptly froze, then after a moment of silence, he helplessly exclaimed, "Damn it! There was actually a chance of that happening." But it was too early to worry about this since it was only May, still far away from December. He also noticed that he had a few unread system notifications. Ding! Congratulations to player Chen Yi for becoming the first player in the world to acquire a vehicle. You've earned the title. Yay, I got a car. Ding! Congratulations to player Chen Yi's vehicle for topping the global vehicle leaderboard. Acquired non-permanent title. Your cars are all super weak. Chen Yi looked expressionlessly at his own backpack, and sure enough, there lay 2 titles, quiet and still. After a moment of silence, he calmly wore the 2 titles above his head. He was used to it, having already had 5, it didn't make much difference to have 2 more. He then looked at the Tuberculosis Rabbit, which had almost recovered, and turned to walk towards the rooftop iron door. Let's head back, you get carsick pretty badly, hey. Actually, I only get carsick when Yi drives. Backpack slots were starting to run low on space. Skill fragments took up too much room. But it seemed like he saw a prop in the points store that could expand the backpack slots. The night had grown deep. Chen Yi had completed the active expert quest for the day on the sled with Tuberculosis Rabbit, and as for Tuberculosis Rabbit, it had finished its tasks in its dreams before even opening its eyes each day. This might just be the son of the version. After all, engaging in 1,000 conversations a day was actually quite tiring. Speaking of which, he wasn't sure if stuff like "it hurts, pinch me," that's fast counted as conversation. If they did, then this task wouldn't be too difficult. Tuberculosis Rabbit had already fallen asleep beside him. As usual, it was mumbling in its dreams. He could only hear fluent speech, but when he really listened, he realized it was all nonsense. It was just idle chatter, not a single serious word at all. He wondered why Tuberculosis Rabbit thought it was giving a speech in its dreams. Who would talk about such things in a speech? It sounded more like speed dating. Meanwhile, he lay in bed, finding a comfortable position, and kept flipping through the points store. Spending his remaining points, little by little, until they were all gone. Buy. It must be said, this feeling of shopping was quite pleasant. They say men don't like shopping, but it's really just that there aren't many things they want on the streets. You haven't seen how focused and delighted men are when they browse through a games prop shop. Meanwhile, in the apartment above Chen Yi's, a young couple sat on their bed, knees hugged to their chests, expressionlessly gazing at two titles poking up from under the bed. Yay, I bought a car. Your cars are all super weak. After a long while, the young man finally spoke in a sigh. Is it because there are too many titles, so they came up from the floor below? Then he reached out to touch the title, but there was no sensation, his hand went right through it. Although it doesn't have any form, it still somehow feels weird. Should we keep going? The woman tightened the air conditioning blanket around herself and asked weakly. How can we keep going? The man shook his head helplessly. It always feels like we're being watched. Is that bad? Upon hearing this, the man began to breathe more rapidly, and the next second, he tossed aside the air conditioning blanket and pounced like a hungry tiger. In the midst of the chaos, a pale and tender hand reached out and began to gently caress that title. Chen Yi, who had already fallen asleep, sat up expressionlessly from the bed. He lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth, staring blankly out the window. He couldn't see what was happening upstairs, but he could hear it. He was about to fall asleep. With such a disturbance, who could sleep? Seeing that things showed no sign of quieting down, Chen Yi silently switched the option that kept the title alight to one that made it flash repeatedly. This should quiet things down a bit. The next second. Damn, why is the noise even louder now? Are they crazy? Chapter 36. Has the outside world changed so much just overnight? The night passed slowly. Chen Yi picked up the remote and turned up the temperature of the air conditioner in the room slightly. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, wrapped in a robe, facing the window, he poured a little hot water from the thermos cup and sipped it lightly. It was already dawn. This night, many people probably had trouble sleeping. Fortunately, so far electricity and drinking water are still functioning normally, but many factories have been shut down for a long time, and if this issue isn't resolved soon, humanity will have to slowly revert to an era where each household has to cultivate their own food. Yi. The tuberculosis rabbit, lying on another bed, rubbed his eyes and said in a drowsy voice, "You're awake? I didn't disturb you last night, did I?" "No." Chen Yi's face remained calm as he set the thermos cup aside, lit a cigarette, took it to his mouth, and with a faint dark circle under his eyes, he remained silent without speaking. Then he shook his head and got up to walk to the bathroom. "I'm going to take a shower first. After I'm done, you brush your teeth, and then we'll prepare to go out today." "Oh." The tuberculosis rabbit, still looking a bit reluctant, wiped the drool from the corner of his mouth, then took the claw knife from under his pillow and looked at its charge progress, grinning satisfactorily. The charge progress is already at 762. Tomorrow it should be able to break 1,000. He had intended to use it in this swarm of creatures, but in the end, he didn't get a chance to act, so the charge progress just kept accumulating. The next time he gets a chance to take action, he would try to see what kind of power the claw knife would have after being charged for so long. Standing under the spray, stark naked, Chen Yi looked at the global vehicle leaderboard in the steamy bathroom. Only the top 100 could make it onto the leaderboard. At the moment, the 100th position was filled with players, but most of them were E-level vehicles, with only 7 or 8 D-level vehicles. his sea-level vehicle was still in first place. However, how long it could retain that position was unclear, given that there were so many people worldwide, and there was no telling when some lucky player might suddenly appear. Most E-level vehicles were uniformly the Bright brand pedal bicycle. Vehicle name, Bright brand pedal bicycle. Vehicle level, E-level vehicle. Vehicle effect, can seat 2 people at the same time, with no upper limit to maximum speed. Unlike typical bicycles, this bicycle theoretically can reach subliminal speeds if you pedal fast enough. Vehicle introduction, remember to have a fat person sit in the back seat so that your chances of survival greatly increase when being chased. Basic score, 10 points. Vehicle price, 100 points. This prop was explicitly priced in the points store during the global event Extraterrestrial Invader. This prop didn't exist before, but after he obtained the sea-level vehicle yesterday, it triggered a vehicle patch update, and then this vehicle appeared in the points store. 100 points. Not too expensive, but not cheap either. Just kill 100 of the insect race monsters, and you can earn 100 points. The majority of players on the current vehicle leaderboard who made it onto the list own this vehicle, but their scores are not the basic 10 points, some have even reached a score of 80, which probably means the vehicles were modified to increase their scores. So far, the points store only has this one vehicle. As for the remaining 7 D-level vehicles on the leaderboard, they are completely different vehicles, likely obtained by killing insect race monsters or opening gift packages. Last night, there must have been many players killing insect race monsters and purchasing limited time 520 event gift packages, but in the end, only 7 managed to get a vehicle. This demonstrates just how low the drop rate for vehicles is. With this in mind, perhaps in the future, most players will only have their own 2 feet as their mode of transportation. However, Chen Yi, expressionless, fell silent as he stared at the details of the vehicle ranked 6th on the vehicle leaderboard, at a loss for words for a moment. Can this thing really be called a vehicle? Vehicle name, orange-flavored exploding beads. Vehicle level, D-level vehicle. Vehicle effect, embedded at the back, and it will absorb all your emissions, storing them for later use. You can activate the exploding beads at any time to enable low-altitude straight-line flight. Vehicle introduction, it can fly close to the ground or take off from a standstill, but keep in mind that it can only fly in a straight line. You cannot control it to turn. Basic score, 100 points. Current score, 189 points. Owner, Li Yide. After a long while, Chen Yi let out a sigh, slowly closed his eyes, and enjoyed the comfort of the hot water showering down on his head. Early in the morning, he really didn't feel like seeing these eyesores. A basic score of 100 points and a current score of 189 implied that the player had made some modifications to the vehicle. What kind of person would make modifications to such a vehicle? Despite being somewhat of an eyesore, it would indeed be a precious commodity if it could save your life at a critical moment. But this modification function. He curiously glanced at the modification panel to see what kind of alterations he could make to his own vehicle. Suddenly, a long panel appeared before his eyes. Self-controlled double-barreled rifle, 500 points. Nitrogen injector, 1000 points. Jump ejector, 800 points. Falling star spear, unknown. Simple and clear. Apparently, as long as you have enough points, you can purchase these items and install them on your own vehicle. He even saw an option for a nuclear missile silo. In other words, theoretically, he could even mount a nuclear missile silo onto a bicycle, if he so desired. Quite absurd. Chen Yi didn't look any further, but instead quickly wiped down his body and shaved off the stubble that had grown over the past few days before exiting the bathroom. Today was May 21st. It was the last day of the 520 limited time event. After today, the title Lucky Child of the God of Love would become a permanent limited edition, and the 520 limited time 88 points gift pack would no longer be available for purchase. He wasn't particularly interested in the gift pack, but he was somewhat interested in the title. After all, it was a permanent limited edition title, and today was the last day to get it. Once today passed, he would never be able to get that title again. Although it wasn't very useful, but he kind of wanted to collect it. Only now he couldn't find someone he genuinely liked to confess to. For him, that was still a difficult task. Soon, the two of them brushed their teeth and washed up, then walked out of the residential complex onto the street. However, just as Tuberculosis Rabbit stepped out of the complex, his mouth slowly gaped open in shock, muttering to himself. Did I sleep for 7 or 8 days in one go? Has the outside world really changed this much overnight? Last night, they triggered a patch update which caused all vehicles to disappear. Chapter 37. Limited edition title Lucky Child of the God of Love, for sale. Not a single vehicle was visible on the street. No matter if the loan had been paid off or not, your car was gone. But this morning, not even 9 o'clock yet, the streets were bustling with traffic once again. One after another, rickshaws whizzed by, propelled by humans. Yes. Overnight, the city had somehow filled with throngs of hard-working individuals pulling rickshaws. Chen Yi reached out to hail a rickshaw, handed a cigarette to the bare-chested middle-aged man with a towel around his neck, and then began to inquire. Who organized you guys? What's the charge? He asked bluntly, and the middle-aged man was just as straightforward with his reply. A big boss found us last night. That big boss has many companies under his control and even has some connections with the Law Enforcement Bureau. It's said he's a person with influence high above. He gave us the rickshaws and told us we'd split the day's earnings 50-50. By the way, where do you want to go? Chen Yi nodded thoughtfully and then shook his head, nowhere in particular. It was quick. These capitalists, upon seeing a sudden vacancy in the market, were like wolves spotting a chunk of meat, relentlessly seizing the opportunity. Our boss said, if the customers don't know where to go, we can recommend a place. The Chongyang Bird Market. A lot of people are there trading skill fragments they don't need, along with some props and whatnot. You might want to check it out, it's also owned by our boss. Oh. Chen Yi raised an eyebrow with interest, then, how do you charge? 2 points, I'll take you anywhere in the city, no distance restrictions. As long as we don't leave the city. Fine, let's go. Right away, please sit tight, sir. The rickshaw puller, somewhat excited, wiped the sweat from his forehead with his towel and started running, pulling the rickshaw with vigor. The man before him had a total of 7 titles above his head. Clearly, he was an important figure. Pulling such a person around the city, that adds to one's face, doesn't it? About 20 minutes later, Chen Yi successfully arrived at the Chongyang Bird Market that the man had mentioned. By now, there were already quite a few people here. Vendors sat cross-legged at both ends of the street, holding up signs with the names of their skill fragments, calling out loudly, while pedestrians stood in the center of the street, stopping to ask for the price. This scene before him had already become a fairly well-established barter market. And none of this was here yesterday. They're really fast, said Tuberculosis Rabbit, clicking his tongue. I gotta say, sometimes these capitalists do get some human things done. Having such a place benefits all the players in Yancheng. It's actually a piece of good news. To form a complete skill, one needs 5 identical skill fragments. But the skill fragments each person obtains are random. Here, you can trade your surplus skill fragments for those you actually need. Chen Yi frowned slightly, without saying anything else. Leaning on his cane, he walked towards the entrance of the street, ready to see if there was anything he needed inside. As Chen Yi set foot in, all around the bird market, everyone's breath hitched, and within a matter of seconds, the previously bustling market fell utterly silent. There was good reason. The glaringly bright red patterned circle with a 2-meter diameter beneath Chen Yi's feet, along with the 7 massive titles above his head that shone even in the daylight, were simply too eye-catching. It would have been difficult for him to go unnoticed. Almost instantly, everyone had figured out who this person was, none other than Chen Yi, the very same who single-handedly killed the insect race monster in Yancheng the day before. The silence lasted only a few seconds. An even louder commotion erupted. Brother Chen Yi, look over here, I definitely have the skill fragments you need. Yi bro, I've got a limited edition prop here, come take a look, no one else but you is worthy of it. I've got a limited edition title here, I see you don't have it, Yi bro. Do you want it? I'll sell it to you for, oh no, I'll give you a good deal, Yi bro. Chen Yi didn't speak, instead, he squatted in front of a vendor, bending down to take a closer look. Because, there truly was something he needed. Written in big letters on the vendor's whiteboard was the following line. Limited edition title Lucky Child of the God of Love, cheap. You're selling this title? Chen Yi looked up at the middle-aged man who appeared somewhat older, and casually said, name your price. The middle-aged man, hesitating for a moment upon seeing Chen Yi stop at his stall, finally extended a shaky finger. "What's that price?" "I want an E-class, bright brand pedal bicycle from the Points store." As his words fell, the listening vendors and passers-by nearby burst into laughter. "I say, brother, just because you see brother Chen Yi isn't short on money, it doesn't mean you can fleece him like this." "Exactly, and to think you would even sell a title like that, it's downright shameful. To be honest, I look down on you from the bottom of my heart." A young man, with a look of scorn and disdain, leaned forward and spat a thick gob of spit at the middle-aged man. "Brother Chen Yi, you might not be aware. It's true that titles can be traded, but the effect of this title is when you face certain death, there's a 1 in 10 chance that the crisis is transferred to someone you truly love. Titles can be traded, but their effects cannot. That means if you, brother Chen Yi, buy this title, when you encounter certain death, there's a 1 in 10 chance this man's true love will take the hit for you. What do you say, isn't this equivalent to selling his wife's life? Shouldn't he be scolded? It's simply worse than a beast." Chen Yi nodded thoughtfully, unaware of this effect, but he didn't say much more. Instead, he quickly exchanged for an E-class bicycle from the Points store and traded it to the middle-aged man. He bought the title. The transaction was complete. The middle-aged man, without even packing up his stall, squeezed through the crowd and fled from the scene amidst the laughter of everyone around. Yanqing had allocated almost all the points to Chen Yi for this event. Hence, at this point, very few people in Yanqing had the points to buy an E-class vehicle. Those who did were either rich or noble. Just then, a woman with an above-average figure suddenly burst out from the crowd, striding quickly up to Chen Yi, staring intently and excitedly into Chen Yi's eyes with a trembling voice as she urgently said, "Look into my eyes. I like you, I like you, I like you, I." Before she could finish, "Go like your mom." The tuberculosis rabbit, with an unpleasant expression, put away the wooden stick in his hand, looked at the woman who had fainted in front of him with a hint of disgust and said, "Lucky for me, I reacted quickly, otherwise Yi bro, you might have fallen for her trap." Chapter 38. But we need that piping hot coffee. Before the crowd could react, the woman who had burst out from among them was knocked to the ground by the tuberculosis rabbit with a single blow, falling to the ground and staying utterly motionless, as if asleep. Chen Yi, however, frowned deeply, taking a sharp breath with a somewhat unhappy expression, and stared at the woman lying on the ground without speaking. The thing he had feared the most had still happened. In the 520 limited time event, if you confessed to someone you truly liked, there was a 1 in 10 chance of transferring a fatal crisis onto them if you were destined to die. He didn't have anyone he truly liked. He couldn't participate in this event. There was nothing to regret about this. But now he had appeared in a global announcement once and had made it onto 2 global leaderboards, making his fame far from small. What he had been worried about was the possibility that if someone were to confess to him at this time, wouldn't he become their scapegoat? Originally, today was the last day of the event. Once today was over, this 520 limited time event would be no more, but the sudden appearance of this woman had really made his heart skip a beat. Although he was not sure if it was possible to truly like someone in just a day or two, he couldn't afford to gamble on such odds. After that, he did not hesitate at all. He kicked the woman lying on the ground away. Activating the C-grade vehicle. Mechanical Moose Christmas Sleigh. Then without any hesitation, he quickly flew into the clouds with the tuberculosis rabbit, leaving the place behind. In the garden district, inside a rental apartment, Chen Yi let out a small sigh of relief as he stood by the window. He only felt somewhat safe after returning home. To confess to someone you truly like, there needed to be an act of confession. That is to say, as long as he didn't check his phone messages and hid, even if someone wanted to confess to him, they wouldn't be able to find him, and he would be safe. Tuberculosis Rabbit. Chen Yi, still feeling uneasy, spoke up, "Keep an eye out for anyone who shows any sign of wanting to confess to me, and use your claw knife to strike first before anything else." "Don't worry, I get it. Interrupting casting spells, I'm used to it," replied the tuberculosis rabbit. Soon, a day passed just like that, and when the sun rose again it was already May 22nd. Yes, Chen Yi, for the sake of safety, had stayed in his rental apartment for an entire day, going nowhere. It wasn't until the 520 limited time event officially ended that he finally breathed a sigh of relief. This event was really too much trouble, it made one feel quite insecure. He hadn't eaten for quite a while. To keep a low profile, Chen Yi did not use the Christmas sleigh but instead walked with the Tuberculosis Rabbit, planning to find a restaurant discreetly to grab something to eat. But when he saw the way people were looking towards him, Chen Yi's expressionless face fell silent for a while before he finally took out the Christmas sleigh. It seemed whether he took out the Christmas sleigh or not, he was conspicuous. Chen Yi leisurely parked the sleigh in front of a shop selling small steamed buns. "Boss, give me 2 baskets of meat-filled buns, 1 basket of glass noodle buns, and 2 bowls of seaweed soup." "All right, that will be 8 points," replied the boss. "Okay." Chen Yi nodded, a flicker of surprise passing through his eyes. They've started charging with points for transactions? Weren't the prices a bit high? It's important to know that for most people, their source of points was now limited to just daily tasks. Each day one could only receive 1 point. And here, 8 points would be gone on just a meal. As if seeing the confusion in Chen Yi's eyes, the boss explained while busying himself, "Now everyone can earn points from the official sources, it's not too shabby. Like going outside the city to build the defensive structures, you can get points every day. And now for things like pork, they're all stock from before and the prices are really expensive. I hear the officials have already started looking for props and skills related to living, planning to clear some wasteland outside the city for self-sufficiency. Fortunately, this area of Yancheng is suitable for both farming and breeding. Anyway, I'm not clear on the specifics of the troubles, so let's have some buns. You eat first." Soon, steaming hot buns were served. Chen Yi took a deep breath, immediately picked up a bun with his chopsticks, dipped it in the spicy broth, and put it in his mouth, chewing contentedly before finishing. Then he held the piping hot seaweed soup to his lips, blew on it a few times, and slowly took small sips. So blissful. Who knows if in the future, one would still be able to sit so leisurely in a shop, eating dumplings and drinking seaweed soup like now. What used to be an extremely ordinary activity now seemed somewhat blissful. Just then, "Brother!" A bald, sturdy man suddenly appeared from the side, with a silly smile on his face, looking straight at Chen Yi and scratching the back of his head while smiling. "Tai Chui!" Chen Yi was startled for a moment before recognizing him, about to say something when he suddenly saw a half-smoked cigarette protruding from the pocket of Tai Chui's shirt. That cigarette looked very familiar, wasn't it the one he gave to Tai Chui on the helicopter? He hasn't smoked it yet? But still, he raised his hand towards the owner, 2 more bowls of seaweed soup, and 4 more baskets of buns, please. All right. Come on, sit down. Chen Yi glanced at Tai Chui and the little girl following behind him, gesturing for them to sit down. He hadn't been in contact with them since they parted on the outskirts last time and didn't expect to meet them again today. The little girl's outfit today was similar to the last time. She was still wearing a black tight short-sleeve top with denim shorts on the bottom. Despite her small stature, she carried herself like a little adult. The little girl stood in front of Chen Yi, her expression serious as she extended her hand and crisply said, "My name is Ji. Pleased to meet you properly, my brother likes you a lot." Chen Yi paused for a moment, then put down his chopsticks and took Ji's hand awkwardly. "Oh, my name is Chen Yi. Have a seat." They had met once before. His impression of the two was still not bad. There was a combination machine that could ascend to the heavens with a left foot stepping on the right. Tai Chui seemed a bit slow-witted, while Ji appeared to always be taking care of her brother. They seemed to be a pair of troubled souls. "I am Tuberculosis Rabbit." The Tuberculosis Rabbit sitting next to Chen Yi swallowed the bun in his mouth, then grinned and said, "Yi told me about you guys, your combination skill is pretty strong." The buns were quickly served. Chen Yi pushed the buns toward the two sitting opposite him. "Are you guys out looking for food too?" "No." Ji shook her head somewhat gloomily, propped her elbows on the table and let her head droop onto them, her voice low. "Actually, we're looking for a coffee shop. One that can make hot coffee. But we've been searching for a long time and haven't found any coffee shops, only instant coffee or coffee powder. But we must have that kind of hot coffee." "That?" The Tuberculosis Rabbit's hand, holding a bun, suddenly froze in place, his expression odd as he spoke. "Hot coffee. Somehow, that sounds very familiar." Chapter 39. Prop name: a treasure chest that likes to drink coffee. After nodding his head several times, Ji then pulled out a treasure box roughly the size of a napkin from his bosom. It was made of metal. It looked like copper. And there was a funnel embedded on the top of the treasure box. Yi, last time in the outskirts, didn't you tell us to pick up the props dropped by those minor bosses? We were quite slow and only picked up a little. Most of the rest were picked up by the officials. One of the props was this one. Yi, take a look. Ji also started to call Chen Yi just like Tuberculosis Rabbit did. Tai Chui had been sitting on his stool, somewhat restrained since sitting down, not sure what he was thinking. And the panel of this treasure box was shared right before their eyes. Prop name, a treasure box that loves to drink coffee. Prop level, D level. Prop effect, to open this treasure box, you must let it drink hot, freshly ground coffee for 30 continuous seconds, not some rubbish instant coffee, and you can't interrupt the process. Prop restriction, remaining opening time 26 minutes and 29 seconds. Prop description, you mortals simply do not understand the beauty of coffee. It's this one. Ji, somewhat downcast, leaned on the table. There is less than half an hour left, and this treasure box will never be able to be opened again. Yet we looked all day yesterday and couldn't find a single coffee shop that was open. We thought about breaking in to do it ourselves, but after going in and studying for a long time, we still didn't know how to do it. Before we figured it out, we were surrounded by people outside. In the end, we had no choice but to leave. Gulp. Tuberculosis Rabbit stared at the treasure box before him, swallowing unconsciously and murmuring, I don't know why, but I have a bad feeling about this. Chen Yi also looked at the treasure box with a strange expression, shaking it in his hand. Loves to drink coffee. Tuberculosis Rabbit, take this treasure box to the kitchen and try opening it, I'm curious to see what's inside as well. Understood. Tuberculosis Rabbit twitched the corners of his mouth slightly, nodded, picked up the treasure box, and headed for the kitchen. Can I have a room with no one in it? You can open it. Ji paused, a glint in his eye, looking at Chen Yi with a hint of excitement. That would be great, not being able to open this treasure box has been killing me. But Yi, don't worry, whatever props come out will be yours. After all, the treasure box was dropped by the boss you killed, and you will be the ones opening it. We definitely won't fight over props with Yi, it's just that seeing the treasure box right before my eyes and not being able to open it is very frustrating. Chen Yi didn't respond and just began to focus on eating his meal. Buns don't taste good once they're cold. And seaweed soup is even worse when it's cold. A moment later, Tuberculosis Rabbit walked out of the kitchen looking relaxed. Setting aside an open treasure box he seemed somewhat disgusted with onto a table. Only one prop came out of it. Here. Prop name, Wilderness Pass. Prop level, D level. Prop effect, when the wilderness map opens up, players with this prop can enter the wilderness unhindered. Uses, 3/3. Prop introduction, the wilderness, that's a place that even saints can hardly resist. Wilderness Pass. Chen Yi stared at the small card that had popped out of the chest, his brow furrowed in thought without speaking. A wilderness pass? When was the wilderness map opened up? What does it mean? Does it imply that Blue Star will open up new maps? To be honest, it didn't sound like a very good thing. I'm going to hang on to this for now. After pondering for a moment, Chen Yi stuffed the wilderness pass into his backpack, then took out another defense prop, also of D class, and handed it to the two people in front of him. This is for your compensation. Each player's backpack slots were limited to 100, but he had recently bought a backpack expansion coupon from the points store, upgrading his backpack to 300 slots. It was more than enough for him to carry a lot of stuff. Besides that, he also bought a whole mess of stuff in bulk from the points store last time. Like the star upgrading coupon, he didn't even know what it was for. But he still spent 100,000 points to buy all the star upgrading coupons from the points store, for one sole reason, they were limited items. His principle was to buy out whatever was limited first and talk about it later. After buying them, the prop only showed a sentence that it could star up, and he tried to use it on props without any effect. It seemed not something to be used at the current stage. Alright, then. Just as Chen Yi was about to get up and leave, he saw Tai Chui's expectant look and after a momentary pause, he smilingly dug out a cigarette and offered it to Tai Chui. Want one, brother? Sure, heh. Tai Chui immediately stood up, took the cigarette with both hands with great reverence, and placed it carefully into his coat pocket, then similarly pulled out a pack of cigarettes from his pants pocket, took out one, and handed it to Chen Yi. Here, brother, have one. All right. Chen Yi smiled as he took the cigarette, then waved goodbye and turned to leave the shop. Yi. Tuberculosis Rabbit let out a belch and then casually said, "That big brother, is he brain damaged? Seems like people with that condition wouldn't last long in the current environment." "Probably is." Chen Yi shook his head softly. "He probably has some intellectual disabilities, still at the level of a few years old kid, but they can survive quite long, though. After all, with their skill combination that lets them touch the sky by stepping on their own feet, they can run away quite effectively. Unless they're facing guided missiles, it's very hard to keep them down." Just then, Chen Yi's eyebrows suddenly raised as he got a prompt that 3,000 points had been added to his account. He looked closely at the source of the transfer. It was the Law Enforcement Bureau settling their compensation from the last time they cleaned the movie theater. He had thought that after the incident at Mutual Entertainment KTV, the Law Enforcement Bureau would call them for clean-up, but they hadn't, which seemed to mean that they found someone else. And as they were about to leave, suddenly, a wave of panicked, noisy clamor came from a foot massage shop next door. A man with the title Fatal Strike above his head appeared to be anxiously and fearfully rushing out of the shop, holding onto his pants. The shop was filled with continuous sounds of panic. "What is this?" Curious about what was happening, Chen Yi was just about to ask when he heard continuous shouts of alarm from inside the shop. It seemed like a technician had been made to bleed by that man. He suddenly fell silent, guessing what might have happened. If he recalled correctly, the Fatal Strike title should have a 3% critical hit rate. It looked like the service just now was unlucky enough to land a critical hit. Chapter 40. Selling 300 tons data hard drives for 20 points each, limited to 100 units. Impressive. Tuberculosis Rabbit looked at the man running away in panic, his face filled with amazement, and couldn't help clicking his tongue. "What's the time now, and you still have the mind to think about this? Think if you want, but can this also be considered as a critical hit? What will you do in the future, Yi?" He then looked toward the entrance of the foot bath shop, where several security guards, with anxious expressions and hurriedly wielding batons, were looking around for the person who had fled. "Hey, stop looking around blindly," he ran into the alley behind that internet cafe. However, the security guards seemed as if they hadn't heard anything, continuing to stand at the entrance of the foot bath shop, anxious and angry, still looking around. After a moment of speechless silence, Tuberculosis Rabbit raised his voice. "Are you deaf? I said he ran into that alley." As his words fell, the security guards finally reacted, first glaring at Tuberculosis Rabbit to indicate he should mind his own business, but upon seeing Chen Yi standing beside Tuberculosis Rabbit with a head full of title banners, they froze on the spot. A flicker of fear crossed their eyes as they looked at Chen Yi with a helpless gaze, their hands joining in a praying gesture in the void. Before Tuberculosis Rabbit could react, he saw a tattooed strongman who weighed over 200 pounds and was dressed in a suit walk out of the foot bath shop. "Where is he?" The strongman's voice was dark and deliberate. "I'm asking you, where is he?" Don't know." The security guards looked at each other, then spoke in a trembling voice, "That guy ran too fast, we didn't see where he went. A bunch of useless trash." Tuberculosis Rabbit, with a blank expression, took a cigarette from his pocket and put it in his mouth. If it were so easy, wouldn't he have understood already? These security guards didn't really want to catch up. After all, it was a man with the title Fatal Strike above his head. If they actually caught up to him, who knew what might happen? They were just out to make some money, there was no need to risk themselves. "Let's go." Chen Yi glanced around and without lingering, pulled out the mechanical moose Christmas sleigh from his pocket and shot towards the distance. No one dared to provoke him. After all, the deterrent power of those 8 titles above his head was still there. "Where are we going?" Seated in the back of the Christmas sleigh, Tuberculosis Rabbit held onto the railing tightly, his face pale as he yelled into the wind, "Yi, next time can we at least add something wind shielding? The wind's really strong. I'm really scared. Yi, have you forgotten the rule that falling from over 18 meters is certain death? It's very dangerous." Those two sentences of mine were quite rhyming. With a face white as a sheet and fear in his eyes, Tuberculosis Rabbit suddenly licked the corner of his mouth with a sense of unfinished business, feeling that the two sentences he just said were quite symmetrical and rhymed well. "There's nothing to be afraid of." Chen Yi, unconcerned, looked down at the navigation device in his hand and spoke casually, "You talk as if without this rule, you wouldn't die from falling 18 meters anyway. Today was the second day of the extraterrestrial invader event. Yancheng was the first globally to solve the insect race assault. As for the situation in other cities, they had no channels to understand, only able to pick up bits and pieces of news online. The world was already like this. Information systems hadn't collapsed, the internet still existed. If I remember correctly, dozens of miles away from Yancheng lays Sunset City. I wonder what the situation is like there now. He tried searching for the local forum of this city, looking for any available information. Soon enough, a post caught his eye. For sale, 300 tons data hard drive, 20 points each, only 100 available, transaction in person. 6. Someone knows how to seize a business opportunity, hey. Admiration shone in the eyes of Tuberculosis Rabbit, who leaned in and said, to speak or not to speak, under the current circumstances, a 300 tons data hard drive for 20 points is indeed not expensive. But that's for us. The average person probably doesn't have many points left in their pockets now, right? Chen Yi nodded and didn't say much more, at least indicating the city hadn't fallen yet and, from the looks of it, wasn't in a state of imminent destruction. Afterward, he pushed the snow sled to its top speed, charging straight towards the location of the city from low altitude. His plan was simple. To kill more bugs before the extraterrestrial invaders' activity ended. In doing so, he could save a few more lives while earning some extra kill points for himself. The mechanical moose Christmas sleigh had a top speed of 280 km per hour and a fixed point consumption of 300 per hour. Before long, the sun had only just risen halfway, and Chen Yi and his companions were already hovering above Sunset City. Along the way, they had seen quite a few villages and towns. These rural areas and towns were also surrounded by insect race monsters. Not only the cities. It seemed that wherever there were people, these bug-like monsters would appear. He didn't lend a hand. Because, it didn't look like they needed his help. With the help of buildings and cold weapons, those people managed the insect race monsters quite handily, keeping them constantly at bay, without breaking their defenses. In the skies above Sunset City now, the insect race monsters were quietly lying in large numbers outside the city perimeter, while the players inside the city hadn't rushed out yet, creating a surprisingly peaceful scene. And on the extraterrestrial invaders' Sunset City points leaderboard floating above the city, the first place already had nearly 29,000 kill points. Is there going to be a break in combat? Chen Yi nodded thoughtfully. He had always been curious, if every city was under attack by nearly 1 million insect race monsters, without sufficient mental preparation, how could they possibly hold up? Now he understood. Under normal circumstances, after attacking for a while, the insect race monsters would start to rest, and the players could use this time to regroup and adjust. That way, they wouldn't be wiped out in one fell swoop. What Chen Yi didn't know was, many players in Sunset City were now looking up in shock at the sleigh hovering above their city. The sleigh, gleaming with a fluorescent glow and led by 4 crystal-clear mechanical elk, looked shiny and extraordinary. A mark of something beyond normal. Add to that the 8 shining titles above Chen Yi's head. Forget the dark, even in broad daylight, this scene was exceptionally conspicuous. It made the players of Sunset City, who had just returned from the front line and were in the throes of an adrenaline rush, glance at each other with embarrassment. This situation was like, they had just struggled in Newbie Village for a long time and finally succeeded, about to celebrate. When they saw a high-level character come to inspect their Newbie Village. Chapter 41. Ding, player Chen Yi, hello. Since there's nothing wrong, I'm off. Chen Yi urged the sleigh on, and immediately left Sunset City, shooting off into the distance. There were mainly 2 purposes for this trip. First, to see if he could find a higher-level insect race queen, such as a level 3 or even a level 4 matriarch. Second, the Wilderness Pass prop had him feeling slightly uneasy. He planned to go out and see if Blue Star had suddenly acquired some new maps, otherwise the introduction to this prop was rather suggestive. Just as his sleigh had left Sunset City not long before, he suddenly noticed something odd within the city. An abrupt stop. He halted the sleigh mid-air and turned to look back at Sunset City, finally spotting what was amiss. Within Sunset City, there were no fewer than 9 enormous old men dressed in Christmas attire. Each stood as tall as a 3-story building. A nearly 10-meter-tall mini-boss. And these 9 old men in Christmas attire stood in the middle of Sunset City like statues, motionless, with players occasionally approaching to chat with Santa Claus. Chen Yi's brows slightly furrowed, and he squinted in confusion without speaking. What the heck was this? In Yancheng, he had never seen such a thing. It was only during the limited time event on May 20th that some cupids made an appearance. Afterward, he glanced at a prop in his pack to make sure there were no issues before he relaxed and prepared to go down for a closer look. The last time he killed a level 2 insect race matriarch, a defensive prop dropped. Prop name, a cigarette that won't light. Prop level, C grade. Prop introduction, when you have this cigarette in your mouth, you will possess a strong premonition of danger, and upon activating this prop, you will have 1 second of invincible time. After use, it cools down for 24 hours. Prop introduction, 1 second of invincibility is pretty strong. Defensive props seem to be rarer than offensive and functional ones. They're not even sold in the points store. So far, he had only seen this one, dropped by the insect race queen, and even though it was just 1 second of invincibility, it was enough. As for the tuberculosis rabbit, it was best to grip the claw knife in reverse and strike. The best defense was offense, and he had been charging up for so long without testing its effect yet. He brought the sleigh to a halt in the center of the city. With the prop in his mouth, Chen Yi gave the surroundings a look. Feeling no sense of danger, he breathed a sigh of relief and approached the giant Santa Claus nearby, leaning on the Christmas cane. If he remembered correctly, Christmas Day was in December, which was still a long way off. Why were there so many Santa Clauses showing up here? He was puzzled. It was definitely a product of the game, but what confused him was why Yancheng didn't have this. Chen Yi suddenly stopped, looking towards the bystanders who were staring at his title with shock. Sometimes, it wasn't that he wanted to peek intentionally, but the cane's innate ability always made him see things he shouldn't, tempting him to take a closer look despite himself. He shook his head, no longer dwelling on it, and strode towards Santa Claus. Before he could even ask the people around him what was happening, a panel popped up in front of him. Ding, player Chen Yi, hello. We are Santas who have accidentally traveled from the future to the present. Can you help us return to the future, which is December 24th? If you help us, we can offer you a little something in return. You can assist us in the following ways. 1. Pay 1 point to exchange for 1 Santa Claus exclusive point. 2. Give 1 E-grade prop to exchange for 100 Santa Claus exclusive points and so on. 3. Give 1 E-grade skill fragment to exchange for 20 Santa Claus exclusive points and so on. 4. We're just a pinch of energy away from successfully returning. Total progress, 91889/100k. Chen Yi looked at the panel in front of him with a somewhat expressionless face, became silent for a moment, and felt at a loss for words. The last time he saw this copy, it was from the mouth of a scammer. If he remembered correctly, that scammer claimed to be the first emperor of Qin, promising that for just a few $100, you could get the title of Chili Arch when the Terracotta Warriors come back to life. But he still opened the shop on this Christmas panel in front of him. He decided to check out what kind of things the so-called exclusive Santa Claus points could buy in the shop. Although he didn't know why Blue Star didn't have this Santa Claus, now wasn't the time to worry about that. There are quite a few good things. Chen Yi nodded thoughtfully, and most importantly, he could exchange tasks for the Christmas points inside. For example, 10 exclusive Santa Claus points could be exchanged for a task from Santa Claus. The content of these tasks varied widely. It could be running a lap around the city or killing 5 creatures from the insect race. In any case, after completing the task, you would get a random gift package, as well as 30-80 random points. In the gift package, random items such as skill fragments and props could be found. When you think about it, this could actually greatly speed up most players' growth. After all, for average players, the fastest way to improve their might is by doing tasks, and such high-return tasks are favored by most of them. No wonder there are so many players gathered around here. It turns out they've all come to take on tasks. Chen Yi's attention was suddenly drawn to a prop in the Santa Claus store. Title name, Patron of the Lonely Elderly. Obtaining method, exclusively obtained after successfully helping Santa Claus return home. Title price, 1,000 Santa Claus points. 1,000 Santa Claus points amounting to 1,000 points, was practically like a sprinkling of light rain for Chen Yi. Buy. Without even checking the other items, he decided to purchase this title first. After all, the title was limited to 3 purchases per person. And so far, no one had bought one. Forget it, he'd buy all three, give one to Tuberculosis Rabbit, and keep the rest for appreciation in value later. Since he had suddenly come into a large sum of points, he found he'd developed a habit, he couldn't help but buy out items that were limited for purchase in the shop. If they were limited, they had to be good. Just then, Chen Yi suddenly froze for a second. His Christmas cane had a feature that allowed seeing through obstacles. And when he had looked up at Santa Claus just now, he suddenly saw through the disguise of his Christmas outfit. Underneath the costume wasn't an old man, nor a beauty, but astonishingly a reindeer with plum blossom-shaped antlers. The name above its head read, "I am a little reindeer, I stole Santa Claus's package, snuck back to the past to sell it, I'm so clever, surely no one will find out. If by chance someone does, and since I have no means of attack, all they could do is rob me. But luckily under the name of Santa Claus, no player would attack me. This reindeer's name is awfully long." Chen Yi's expression grew increasingly strange as he looked at the reindeer inside the Santa Claus outfit. Instead of reaching for his cane, he slowly rolled up his sleeves. It looked like he wouldn't need to pay after all. Chapter 42. They've kidnapped Santa Claus? The Santa Claus before their eyes was a towering 3-story high, standing in the city, clearly a colossal figure. However, after seeing through the obstruction, one could find that inside this Santa costume, there was surprisingly just a tiny reindeer. Not much bigger than a husky, really. How exactly the reindeer was controlling Santa, that was unclear. But that was no longer important. Chen Yi sneered, rolled up his sleeves, and after taking a deep breath while standing still, he finally growled, "Invincible under the heavens." The next second, the Invincible under the heavens title effect was activated. A supreme yellowish translucent staircase appeared abruptly in front of Chen Yi, with the other end stretching directly towards Santa's waist and then stopping right at Santa's belly button. After all, this Santa was more than 10 meters tall. Without some ingenuity, he really wouldn't be able to reach Santa. Then, Chen Yi's eyes twinkled with a fearsome gleam, and he chuckled fiendishly as he climbed the stairs, reached the end, and placed his hand on the waistband of Santa's pants in front of him. Bowing his head, he started to untie the waistband seriously. "Oh ho, it's a dead knot. Quite meticulous." Gulp. The crowd of onlookers nearby swallowed hard, their eyes filled with shock and horror, feeling as if their bodies were frozen in place, unable to move. No wonder this guy had so many titles and was announced globally. Indeed, he's no ordinary person. That Tuberculosis Rabbit, holding the claw knife, glanced at the onlookers' gazes and whispered with an expression full of embarrassment and disbelief, "Yi, maybe we should get out of here. If it doesn't work out, we can go to a foot massage parlor to find one, but this is too outrageous, it's embarrassing. Although I've always done whatever you do, Yi, this time it's a bit too much for me, I'm having a hard time accepting it." And before he could finish, Chen Yi, standing on the staircase, swung his arm and yanked Santa's waistband off with a single pull. Suddenly, pants 5 or 6 meters tall tumbled down towards the ground. Whoosh! There was a commotion all around, everyone's eyes unblinking as they watched the scene unfold. A petite reindeer appeared, its forked antlers looking especially appetizing. The reindeer's eyes anthropomorphically filled with terror and panic. "Very good." Chen Yi nodded with satisfaction, jumped down from the staircase, and reached out to the tiny reindeer in front of him. Before he could start talking, he saw the reindeer suddenly open its mouth, spitting a box out from its stomach. Prop name, Santa Claus's gift box. Prop tier, no tier. Prop effect, contains various gifts from Santa's collection, can be opened once a day, and will randomly drop 10 items from inside the gift box. Prop description, did you know that the nuclear bomb in the hands of the little girl selling matches was a Christmas gift from Santa Claus? A glint of light flashed through Chen Yi's eyes, he couldn't help but smile with a satisfied grin. So proactive, hey? These are Santa's gifts inside this box? However, he did not immediately open the gift box. Instead, he picked up the reindeer with one hand, tossed it onto the sleigh, and then the two of them dashed off into the distance. When the reindeer came into contact with the sleigh, a system notification sounded slowly in Chen Yi's ears, but the excited Chen Yi did not notice this notification, he had more important things to do now. The next second, the sleigh shot up into the sky. It vanished from everyone's sight. Just before leaving, the huge Santa Claus suit instantly shrunk to a few small props that flew into the reindeer's backyard. What no one noticed was this. The other 8 Santas in the city had also disappeared at some point, gone without attracting any attention. That. After Chen Yi and the others had flown away, the onlookers standing nearby finally came to their senses, staring blankly at the small black dot disappearing into the horizon. Did they just kidnap Santa Claus? Seems like it. Should we call the police? Probably not necessary. Spill it now. Chen Yi's eyes were ablaze as he hovered the sleigh midair, staring intently at the little reindeer before him. What are the update rules for June? What about July? And August? What about September, October, November, December? Is there any event during these months? Hand over all the details of the event rules. Tuberculosis Rabbit, you take notes. Understood. The Tuberculosis Rabbit also immediately snapped to attention, quickly pulling out a sheet of white paper and a pen from his bosom, his expression serious and full of anticipation as he prepared to take notes. This was no ordinary paper. It was one of the many props he had collected. Prop name, memory paper. Prop level, E. Prop effect, record the information on this white paper and swallow the paper. The information on it will then forever be in your mind, never to be forgotten. Prop description, I hope you use it to record happiness, not hatred. All the useful and useless props they had obtained these days were neatly placed in the Tuberculosis Rabbit's backpack. A collector might look at the array of neatly organized props in their backpack. And even if most of the props were basically useless, there would still be an intense sense of satisfaction. Plus, sometimes they could come in handy. Like that coffee machine, and this memory paper. Chen Yi gazed eagerly at the little reindeer in front of him. This reindeer had traveled from December, so if he could get even a tiny bit of information about the future updates, he would gain a significant advantage. Not to mention the distance. Even if he only knew what the rules for June's update were, he could start preparing in advance. But... bling bling. The little reindeer before him blinked several times, staring at Chen Yi with an innocent face and shaking its head as if to say that it's just a small reindeer, how could it possibly speak? As Chen Yi's brow furrowed, thinking about how he might communicate with the little reindeer to obtain crucial information about the future, he suddenly noticed that his personal panel's system notification had a small speaker flashing. Out of nowhere, a new system notification had appeared, continuously reminding him. Hey, is there something good? Chen Yi's attention was diverted, looking towards the flashing system notification. The next second, he expressionlessly lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth. Good death. Chapter 43. I want the December Christmas event to have no Santa Claus anymore. System notification, Santa Claus 9 reindeer have stolen Santa Claus gift box and have fled back to the past to secretly sell them. You've apprehended one of Santa's reindeer, number 2378, now, the remaining 8 reindeer have run back to squeal on you. Now Santa Claus is on his way to kill you. Countdown to Santa Claus arrival, 9 hours 22 minutes and 21 seconds. For players' information. 1. Santa Claus is the neutral boss of December. Except when he or his reindeer are attacked or captured, he won't hurt any player, but his strength is equivalent to that of December's boss and far beyond the abilities of players in May. 2. Santa Claus can only act at night and cannot move during the day. 3. Santa Claus can stay in the past for a maximum of 24 hours. If players survive for 24 hours, Santa Claus will return empty-handed. P.S. If you successfully evade the pursuit, you'll receive a large number of rewards, including limited edition titles, a large amount of points, rare props, etc. With a blank face, Chen Yi stared at the system notification in front of him, and after a long silence, he slowly exhaled a puff of smoke, muttering in a trance. Tuberculosis Rabbit, Yi is sorry. Yi promised to take you to live a good life. Now it seems I'm going to break my word. What happened now? Startled by his words, Tuberculosis Rabbit's face flashed with panic. He drew a cigarette from his bosom with the fastest speed he had ever mustered, lit it, took a quick drag, then laid back in the chair with a look of relief, looking up at the sky casually. So tell me, when do I die? I'm ready. I remember, when watching movies, every time I saw those people who, with their last bit of strength, lit a cigarette and then died before they could take a puff. Back then, I vowed to myself. Before I die, I must light a cigarette as fast as possible, so I won't leave behind such a bloody regret. For that, I've worked hard for a long time. Finally, from reaching for a cigarette to lighting it and inhaling, this complex series of actions, I can complete in only 0.7 seconds. Afterward, Tuberculosis Rabbit smacked his lips with some emotion, took another satisfied drag and said, "This is the second puff, I've made a profit, even in death, it's not a loss. This is what effort means." Chen Yi swept a peculiar glance over Tuberculosis Rabbit, then looked at that countdown timer with 9 hours left, took a deep breath, and his eyes flashed instantly with ferocity and ruthlessness, as he fiercely tossed the cigarette butt outside the sleigh. He pulled out the sniper rifle, holding it in his hand, his voice hoarse and threatening as he said, "It's just Santa Claus, isn't it? Even if it's a god, as long as there's a health bar, I'll show you how I can slaughter them. Forget Santa Claus, not even a god could withstand my 33 shots. Today, I will make sure the December Christmas event has no more Santa Claus. From now on, no gods in the world." Just then, a new system notification popped up on his personal panel. Supplementary notification: Santa Claus can recover 100% of his maximum health value every second, and his health bar has over 100 million points. Oh, got it, no problem then. Chen Yi once again fell silent, and after a while, he took out a notebook and began to chew on his pen, deep in thought. Tuberculosis Rabbit, what do you say we should do if we only have 9 hours left to live? Find some girls. That direct? Should I be more subtle? After a moment of thought with his head tilted, Tuberculosis Rabbit finally said, "Get a few more, I've always wanted to experience what daughter country is like." Sure. Chen Yi sighed softly, his voice a bit low. "I'll take 99, you take 98, is that enough?" Should be about right. All right, then that's the plan, but you have to lend me that prop. Which prop? Cough. Chen Yi held a fist to his mouth and coughed lightly. It's that one that can make you think about nothing but dirty stuff for 3 hours and keep you up the whole time. No way. Hey. Chen Yi immediately rolled up his sleeves, ready to enlighten the Tuberculosis Rabbit about who the king of the hill was. But at that moment, he suddenly noticed the sun overhead, which was at its zenith. He paused, a glint of revelation flashed through his eyes, and with a voice trembling with fragile hope, he said urgently, "Quick, quick, check for me, what's the rotational speed of Blue Star?" 466 meters per second, equivalent to 1667 kilometers per hour. Yes, exactly like that. Although we're in the northern hemisphere, where the speed may vary a bit, the difference isn't that significant. Chen Yi stood up excitedly from the sleigh, his eyes filled with anticipation and excitement, his voice rapidly quivering. What does this imply? It implies that if we fly over the surface of Blue Star at this speed, against the direction of rotation, we will maintain the same relative position to the sun and thus keep the sky as it was at the start. Which means we can keep the sky above us bright all the time. And that Santa Claus guy can only move around in the dark, which means he can't possibly catch us if we keep the sky above us lit. After 24 hours, Old Man will have to return empty-handed. But the Tuberculosis Rabbit, with a puzzled look, touched the sleigh beneath him. "Yi, do you really plan to get this thing up to a speed of 1667 kilometers per hour? Is that even possible?" "Of course, it is." Chen Yi, looking at the 9 hours left on the countdown, opened the sleigh's modification panel with hope in his eyes. "Don't forget, vehicles can be modified. As long as we have enough points, it's not impossible to upgrade the speed to 1667 kilometers per hour. Let me see, let me see." Soon, he found exactly what he was looking for. Modification options: supersonic nitrogen injection cylinder. Modification effect: add 1, which can increase the maximum speed of your vehicle by 100 km per hour. Modification price: 20,000 points. Modification limit: up to 100 per single vehicle. Yes, this is it. Chen Yi started to calculate, fingers pinching. The current maximum speed of the mechanical moose Christmas sleigh is 280 km per hour. Which means I only need to add about 15 to boost the sleigh's top speed to 1780 km per hour, already above the rotational speed of Blue Star. 15 units, that's 300,000 points. Let me check my points balance: 229,599, almost 230,000. Still short by 70,000 points. The tuberculosis rabbit, sitting in the back seat of the sleigh with an emotional face, looked towards the rear of the sleigh, pondering how to fit 15 supersonic nitrogen injection cylinders onto the back of this sleigh. The sleigh's rear doesn't have a shrinking feature. Is there a place to stick 15 nitrogen cylinders? Even if it had this feature, fitting in 15 would still be somewhat abstract. A moment later, he still spoke up to remind. Yi, I have to remind you of something. If the speed hits 1,780 kilometers and you haven't got a windshield or something, then our demise might resemble Lao Gan Ma with added diced chicken. By the way, Yi, do you like eating Lao Gan Ma? Especially the kind with diced chicken. Chapter 44. At this time in the Arctic Circle, it should be the midnight sun, right? What's this about Lao Gan Ma and not Lao Gan Ma? Chen Yi didn't even lift his head, constantly flipping through the modification panel to see what options were currently available and tallying up the total points needed. First of all, protective glass was definitely needed. Next, whether the sled could withstand the unknown stresses of such supersonic speeds was a complete unknown. There were other additions needed as well. At this moment, the tuberculosis rabbit looked up at the sun above and hesitated before speaking. Say, can we go to the Arctic? Around this time in the Arctic Circle, it should be the midnight sun, right? Wouldn't that allow us to avoid Santa Claus? In theory, it's possible. Chen Yi sat in the sled seat, pondering while gently rubbing his temples before replying. At the end of June, the entire polar region will enter the period of midnight Sunday. Today is May 22nd. Some areas within the polar circle have indeed already started the midnight sun period. But that's just in theory. There are several problems that we can't resolve. First, our sled can only fly at low altitudes. With a sense of helplessness, he spread his hands and continued, do you want to see how many mountain ranges there are from where we are now to the Arctic Circle? This isn't a game where you can just fly straight through. Especially at low altitudes, visibility isn't that far, with such a supersonic sled. Just a second after you spot mountains through the mist, you'd be crashing into them. Too many unknowns. The best solution would be to head towards the Arctic Circle, but not in a straight line. Instead, follow the direction of the sun diagonally, making it easier to maneuver around some obstacles. Gradually increasing latitude while getting closer to the Arctic Circle. That would be a bit safer. And after a moment's hesitation, Chen Yi decided to voice his concerns. If I had a choice, I actually wouldn't want to get close to the Arctic Circle because, in the backstory of Santa Claus on Blue Star, Santa Claus's hometown is in the Arctic Circle. Since the project team chose this backstory, no one knows if they'll incorporate this setting into it or what we'll encounter in that area of the Arctic Circle. As for the Antarctic, that's even less feasible, it's polar night there right now. Then he shook his head and shared the modification panel in the air. We need 15 supersonic nitrogen injection cylinders to give our sleigh enough speed, and this item will cost 300,000 points. Next, we need a protective shield, which costs 30,000 points. A Big Dipper star positioning and cruise system is also 30,000 points. After all, at a speed of 1,780 km/h, we can't possibly navigate with one hand and control the direction with the other, right? If we get into an area with no network and the navigation fails to update, it'd be game over instantly. By uploading the map to the Big Dipper star positioning and cruise system, control becomes much safer. Aside from these, we also need to install an air conditioning system inside the sled, which will cost 3,000 points. Even in summer, the latitude close to the Arctic Circle isn't exactly warm. In total, we need to spend 363,000 points. And we only have 230,000 points at the moment. We're short by 133,000 points. He pulled out a cigarette from his pocket, put it in his mouth, glanced at the countdown for Santa Claus's impending arrival, then looked off into the distance. The kill points from the last time, we still have 20,000 unspent. 1 kill point can be exchanged for 1 point. That means we're still short by 113,000 points. Getting all those points is definitely beyond our reach in the short term, but 113,000 kill points is quite simple. Let's go, time to make some money. The next second. Swoosh. The mechanical moose Christmas sleigh shot towards the distance with a whooshing sound. Half an hour later, they appeared outside a city. At the edges of the city, players could be seen everywhere fighting against the insect race monsters. After the initial fear had passed, people slowly discovered that these monsters weren't that hard to deal with. Gradually, more and more players came out to battle the monsters. Human adaptability is truly terrifying. Such an absurd situation had only been around on Blue Star for a mere 2 months, yet it seemed like people had almost adapted to it. Chen Yi did not observe the city too much, but instead controlled the sleigh to circle constantly above the monsters, searching for the second-level insect race queen. He only had the chance to fire 1 shot. Skill name, Violators, annihilate 9 clans. Skill level, C level. Skill type, active skill. Skill effect, when you kill a person with a firearm, if the target is a player, then the player's subsequent 3 clans will die along with them. If the target is a monster, then the subsequent 999 clans of that monster will die as well. Skill limitation, using it once will result in a 48-hour cooldown. Skill introduction, one day, a tyrant suddenly found the order to annihilate 9 clans too troublesome, so he developed this skill. If he wanted to quickly earn 100,000 points in a short amount of time, he could only rely on this skill. He had to kill a second-level insect race queen to utilize the effect of this skill and swiftly gain 100,000 points, because a first-level insect race queen simply wouldn't be enough. After that, the skill would fall into a 48-hour cooldown, which would be dangerous. The sudden appearance of such a figure in the city's skies couldn't help but be conspicuous. Many people looked up at the figure on the sleigh with some confusion in their eyes. Wasn't the title above his head a bit too much? It was so bright even in the daylight. Just after 10 minutes, Chen Yi's eyes lit up as he looked at a plump insect race queen monster in the midst of the insect tide, his expression revealing a hint of joy. Found her! The familiar second-level insect race queen. She was hiding within the insect tide, commanding the insect race monsters to attack the city in front of her. Without saying another word, Chen Yi positioned the sleigh directly above the head of the second-level insect race queen, pulled out a sniper rifle from his bosom, aimed, and pulled the trigger. Bang! Accompanied by the gunshot, a terrifying scarlet damage number popped up from the top of the second-level insect race queen's head. 1 shot, and another. Chen Yi was like a cold-blooded butcher, calmly and rhythmically firing shot after shot. Especially the cigarette butt held between his lips, its faint flickering scarlet glow casting sinister and distinct shadows over the stubble on his chin. Finally, in the instant that the second-level insect race queen's health bar was about to disappear, Chen Yi silently activated the skill Violators, annihilate 9 clans and fired off the final shot. Boom! Chapter 45. Let's go, I'll take you on a trip around the world. With the final gunshot ringing out, the second-level insect race matriarch, who had always been helpless against Chen Yi, let out a few pained shrieks. Then, her corpulent body burst open instantly. And this scene was clearly witnessed by the players standing on the high-rise buildings in the suburbs of the city. Just as these players were inwardly marveling at someone so powerful, the very next second, the moment the bloated body of the insect race matriarch exploded, numerous red beams thick as forearms shot straight toward several first-level insect race matriarchs within the nest. Like red lasers, they cleanly cut through the battlefield. Before anyone could react, they saw those red beams piercing the bodies of the first-level insect race matriarchs. Each matriarch only had time to look up and let out an agonized howl before their bodies also exploded. And even more red beams were densely shooting toward nearly all the remaining insect race monsters on the battlefield. In an instant, if one looked down from the sky, they would see thousands of red beams continuously shooting and spreading among the crowd of monsters below, as thousands of insect race monsters exploded without a chance to resist. The crimson blood, like a smashed strawberry burst cake, covered the entire battlefield. It was disgusting, and yet, one thought it might taste better with a bit of cheese added. Meanwhile, a series of system reward notifications also kept ringing in Chen Yi's ears. Let's go! Chen Yi briefly scanned the system notifications beside his ear, lowered the sleigh to the ground, and casually stuffed the loot dropped by the second-level insect race matriarch into his backpack. Then he didn't linger any longer. As for the loot dropped by the first-level insect race matriarchs, there was no time to pick them up. Ding! Congratulations to the player for killing 1 second-level insect race matriarch, a total of 360,000 kill points obtained. That's equivalent to 360,000 points. That's enough for now. Instead of leaving immediately, he maneuvered the mechanical moose Christmas sleigh towards the city. It was going to be several days' journey, and he decided to stock up on water and food first. Let's go, Tuberculosis Rabbit. Oh. Tuberculosis Rabbit first nodded and then looked strangely towards a few surviving insect race monsters nearby. There are still some alive. Are they wild breeds? Did other insect race matriarchs birth them? Soon. Chen Yi and the others had supplied themselves with the things they wanted from the city. It didn't take much effort, and no inconspicuous figure came forward to challenge them. After all, their recent achievements and the titles above their heads were quite eye-catching. Many players, standing on the buildings at the edge of the city, watched with complicated expressions as the sleigh departed. That man, just one-shot all the monsters? It was exaggerated. Could they report this to the project team for cheating? Where's the reporting channel? Customer service? Is there no customer service? Well then, never mind, it truly has the familiar style of a domestic online game. Soon, Chen Yi and his team stopped the sleigh in a plane and began their modification journey. Supersonic Nitrogen Injection Cylinders X-15. Protective Shield X-1. Big Dipper Star Positioning and Cruise System X-1. Circulating Wind Energy Air Conditioning System X-1. A total of 363,000 points was spent. After all the modifications were completed, they still had 247,000 points left. And after the modifications, the sleigh had completely changed. Firstly, the backside of the sleigh now had 15 supersonic nitrogen injection cylinders inserted, making the back of the mechanical moose Christmas sleigh look like a peacock flaunting its feathers. It no longer had the neat aesthetic of a mechanical product. It looked a bit messy. At the same time, a huge glass dome now enveloped the entire sleigh. It looked as if several eggshells had been placed on top of the sleigh. Furthermore, inside the sleigh, there was an additional row of dashboard instruments, which was the newly added navigation system. Well, Tuberculosis Rabbit stood beside the sleigh with a touch of emotion, patting the air conditioning unit mounted on the side with a sigh. It's hard to believe that a circulating system bought for 3,000 points could come out looking so shabby. Believe it or not, I could get something better for 3,000 in cash, Yi said with confidence. As for the quality of the sleigh, there was no need for upgrade. Once the supersonic nitrogen injection cylinder modifications exceeded 25 units, the mechanical moose Christmas sleigh would reach its maximum speed tolerance and risk disintegration. The quality of the vehicle couldn't be enhanced. To achieve greater speed, a higher class vehicle was required. But for now, this velocity was more than sufficient for their needs. Phew! Chen Yi glanced at the 5-hour countdown and the sun gradually descending to the mountainside, nodding his head in satisfaction as he let out a breath of relief. Everything was in place. Next up, it was time to race against the sun. A mere December neutral boss giving chase. Nothing to worry about. He scoffed at the sight of a small elk inside the sleigh, blinking and staring at them to earn their affection. Stop looking, your Santa Claus can't save you now. Once this is over, you'll obediently pull the sleigh for me. 9 to 6, that's not too abusive. He didn't linger any longer, needing to leave a 5-hour buffer. After discerning the direction, he boarded the sleigh, turning to Tuberculosis Rabbit who was still outside. Let's go, I'll take you on a trip around the world. Where life doesn't cease, romance never ends. Never in my life did I imagine I'd get to travel the globe. Pretty nice. Boom. With a piercing sonic boom, the sleigh shot forward at a low altitude with a speed the naked eye could not catch. Low-altitude maneuvering is a highly dangerous act. Especially at nearly 1,800 km per hour. Basically, if any mishap occurred, one could close their eyes and upon reopening them, see the king of hell grinning right before them. Ah! Tuberculosis Rabbit clutched the railing tightly, looking at the fast-moving scenery blurring past on both sides, yelling in fright, "Hold on, Yi, did you maybe overlook something? Damn, all the elks have fallen behind us. Can we still steer this sleigh?" The sleigh was indeed fast at that moment. But, the source of the mechanical moose Christmas sleigh's original speed was the mechanical elks in front. Now, the speed provided by the nitrogen injection cylinder at the back of the sleigh had completely exceeded the pace set by the mechanical elks. The consequence was, the mechanical elks, dangling like pendants, were strung out behind, trailing the Christmas sleigh. What was once a neat Christmas sleigh, now, after such a modification, looked disastrously pitiful. A heap of scrap metal. Don't panic, don't panic. Chen Yi, with slight urgency, began trying to regain control using the dashboard. The mechanical elks were initially supposed to provide both speed and steering. Now they weren't needed for speed. But since they had swung to the back, steering had become difficult too. At that point, the entire sleigh was essentially careening out of control in a straight line. And the navigation map showed a mountain range ahead, a full kilometer high. In no more than a minute, they'd hit it straight on. Just then, Chen Yi suddenly had an idea, turning his head to look at the innocent-looking little elk blinking beside him. Santa's sleigh must be quite fast, shouldn't it? After all, he has to deliver so many gifts in one night. If he was slow, he wouldn't make it in time, right? Chapter 46. Shall we go to the Arctic Circle and kill his grandfather? The little elk blinked its eyes a few times, its face innocently silent, without speaking. Soon after, Santa's sleigh gradually came to a halt. Chen Yi removed the mechanical elks from the sleigh and harnessed the little elk, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a carrot, looking seriously at the little elk. Do you understand what you need to do? If you do well, you'll get this carrot as a reward. Tuberculosis Rabbit sighed with his palm on his forehead, speechlessly saying, Yi, it's an elk, not a rabbit, carrots won't work to tempt it. The next second, the elk, only slightly bigger than a husky, gulped down the carrot from Chen Yi's hand, chewed it a few times, and then raised its head to swallow it. Crunchy. Afterward, it nodded several times with bright eyes and willingly put on the harness, its face brimming with confidence, as if steering the sleigh was no challenge at all. After a long silence, Tuberculosis Rabbit pulled out a cigarette from his pocket, put it in his mouth, and took a deep breath, then stared at the little elk with a complicated expression. How tough must your past have been? That old man Santa Claus isn't abusing you every day, is he? Then, the sleigh took off again. This time, it was much better. The reins between the elk and the sleigh were taut, the elk seemed fully in control at this speed, and a rainbow glow could even be seen under the hooves of the running little elk. Chen Yi tugged at the left rein. The elk steered to the left in coordination, and the sleigh followed suit. When Chen Yi connected the reins to the automatic cruising system, the cruising system began to control the reins automatically according to the mapped route. This is kind of absurd. Tuberculosis Rabbit, sitting inside the sleigh, turned to look at the 15 nitrogen injection cylinders at the rear of the sleigh, with their 15 red flames continuously sprayed backward, forming circles of mock cones that looked like stars, exceptionally dazzling. And in front, a little elk with a harness, stepping on rainbow starlight. The scene in front of them seemed very strange. But then again, Tuberculosis Rabbit hesitated before speaking. If the elk is capable of handling this speed, what's the need for these injection cylinders? Why not just use the elk as the initial power source? No. Chen Yi shook his head, pointing at the instrument panel in the cockpit. The current speed is still provided by the injection cylinders. I did ask the elk to speed up just now, but obviously, it couldn't exceed this top speed. It seems that the elk possesses the power to handle the speed rather than create it. After all, this elk has a 4-digit number, and Santa Claus's sleigh has more than just this one elk. The scenery outside the window flew by. In fact, if they were just counteracting Blue Star's rotation, they wouldn't need the sleigh to be this fast. But their journey wasn't a straight path. They had to circumvent many obstacles along the way, which meant they couldn't simply rely on straight-line acceleration. Also, they needed to allow for some margin of error to avoid being too pressed. Most importantly, they were not short on points. Soon, there was only 1 minute left until Santa Claus's arrival. And Chen Yi and the others were fully prepared. Could a mere Santa Claus turn the world upside down? Ding! Santa Claus has arrived, and his real-time coordinates will now appear on the player's map. Please prepare to escape. Let me see where Santa Claus has landed. Chen Yi slightly raised his eyebrows as he opened the map, and when he saw where Santa Claus had landed, he sighed with slight regret. Santa Claus had landed at the equator, right behind them at that moment. Originally, he had thought that if it went by the background story of Blue Star, the Arctic Circle should be Santa Claus's home. If Santa Claus had landed in the Arctic Circle, since it was polar day there, Santa Claus wouldn't be able to move in accordance with the setting that Santa Claus can't move during the daytime. That would have been fun. Unfortunately, it seemed there were no loopholes to exploit. Then we run. Chen Yi snorted coldly with a face full of disdain. I'd like to see if you can catch up to me within 24 hours. A grand and mighty escape journey officially began. You flee, I chase. I chase, you flee. Chen Yi controlled the snow sled, chasing after the sun continuously, the little red dot of Santa Claus always remained far behind them, unable to draw near. A full 5 hours went by. The sun above Chen Yi's head showed no signs of setting, perfectly embodying what it meant for the sun to never set. And that formidable Santa was unable to so much as touch a single hair of theirs in those 5 hours. What a pity! Chen Yi stood on the snow sled, looking at the little red dot of Santa Claus on the map, and shook his head with regret. It's a pity we don't have some powerful offensive means, otherwise, we could kill the neutral boss of December in May. That would be a lot of rewards. Yi. Tuberculosis Rabbit, after mulling over for a while, finally began to suggest, perhaps there's no way. Let's assume, according to the setting, that Santa Claus's home really is in the Arctic Circle. Wouldn't he also have a grandfather or something? What if we go to the Arctic Circle and kill his grandfather? With your skill, wouldn't that also take care of this Santa guy? No, that's wrong. Annihilate 9 clans works on 999 clans. To wipe out this Santa guy's entire lineage. Chen Yi, with a strange expression, pondered for a long time before shaking his head. It's not feasible. A tiger's grandfather isn't a soft tiger. Santa's grandfather is also probably not something easy to mess with. Most importantly, my Annihilate 9 clans skill has a 48-hour cooldown, and I already used it when I just collected enough points. It's still cooling down now. Okay then. Tuberculosis Rabbit nodded seriously, but now I have a more important issue. Yi, I need to use the toilet, and you seem to have not included any in-flight toilet options. Chen Yi looked at the distance between them and Santa Claus on the map and controlled the snow sled to slowly stop, landing in an open area. This place will do. 3 minutes later. Why is it black? You forgot, Yi, that this morning, to open Tai Chui's treasure chest, I used the have a cup of coffee skill, right? That skill lasts for 24 hours, and it's still in effect now. Oh. It's my first time seeing something like this, kind of peculiar. No worries, carry on. After taking care of business, they once again mounted the snow sled and started their escape. Soon, a full 23 hours had passed. Chapter 47. On the way, Chen Yi and the others went from being tense at first to relaxed at the end, and now completely at ease. In another hour, Santa Claus will have to slink back home. Chen Yi casually glanced at the map, lay back in his chair leisurely, picked up a glass of juice next to him, sipped it and popped a piece of thyme seaweed into his mouth, savoring the chew. The scenery along the way was pretty decent. Thanks to the sun, they could clearly see the beautiful rivers and mountains around them. It's really beautiful. Tuberculosis Rabbit had gotten used to this speed, leaned on the window enjoying the scenery below, and said with great enthusiasm, "This world is so beautiful, and we used to be confined to the mortuary all day, working long hours. What a waste of the first half of my life. But working in the mortuary has its perks. You can talk a lot with those people, and they never get tired of it. And after people die, that's when they show their truest selves. Everyone is too fake on a regular basis, not real at all, feels like there's something missing when you chat. Here." Chen Yi casually took out a cigarette, tossed it to Tuberculosis Rabbit, and was about to say something nonchalantly. Suddenly, a notification sound came to his ear. Ding! December's neutral boss Santa Claus invites you to a video call. Chen Yi, with a slightly strange expression, looked at the panel in front of him and hesitated for a moment before choosing to hang up. Let's forget it. What if Santa himself bursts out from the video? It's quite frightening. After all, having led Santa on a 23-hour chase and stolen his little reindeer, Santa's mood must be at its peak of anger now. Who knows what he might do at this point? Better to play it safe. Ding! December's neutral boss Santa Claus invites you again to a video call. Hang up. Ding! December's neutral boss Santa Claus invites you to a video call for the last time. Hang up. Ding! Santa Claus has given you a gift and left a message on it. The next second. Jingle. Suddenly there was an extra prop in the backpack. Chen Yi's eyes flashed with surprise as he looked at the prop in his backpack. Prop name, Santa Claus's feed box. Prop level, none. Prop effect, this feed box produces 10 carrots of various flavors every day that reindeer particularly enjoy eating. Prop introduction, includes cheese flavor, cream flavor, 5-spice flavor, spicy flavor, sweet and sour flavor, etc. Prop message, take good care of my stupid reindeer, its number is 2378, named 5-spice. Keep it alive until December, or, bear the consequences. Return it to me then, and I will reward you handsomely. Is this, backing down? Chen Yi let out a sigh of relief. It seemed he was truly out of danger now. He was really afraid that Santa Claus might suddenly come up with some trick to catch up, which would be quite scary. Then he looked at the Santa Claus's feed box in his hand. A glowing box about the size of a shoebox with a small hole on top. Curious, Tuberculosis Rabbit reached into the hole to fumble around for a moment, pulled out a carrot, and tentatively crunched it in his mouth, then nodded in satisfaction. Strawberry flavored, not bad. I like it. Soon the last hour passed as well. When the red dot belonging to Santa Claus on the map disappeared, multiple system voices continuously rang in his ears. Ding! Congratulations to player Chen Yi for successfully avoiding Santa Claus's pursuit, adding yet another notable and celebratory event to your life's milestones. Reward, 1x random fashion component. Ding! It's been detected that player Chen Yi has been under the sunlight for a full 24 hours. Reward, hidden title. Quaffo chasing the sun. Ding! It's been detected that player Chen Yi has survived the pursuit of a cross-dimensional boss. Reward, hidden title. Is that all? Laughable. Several system prompt sounds followed one after another. Chen Yi was stunned for a moment as he looked at the random fashion component, wondering how he had never seen such a thing before. Fashion? Fashion name, Teddy Bear Pajama Suit Onesie. Fashion level, C grade. Fashion effect, when wearing any piece of this suit, your daily excretions will be molecularly expelled through your pores, freeing you from the need to use the bathroom, allowing you to be an elegant gentleman. Collect all pieces of the suit to obtain the complete set effects. Fashion set, 1/6. Fashion introduction, an elegant gentleman only squats down when he pities the losers. P.S. This fashion is currently not usable. It will become available when the fashion system is updated in the June version. Chen Yi looked at the fashion prop panel in front of him somewhat oddly, and had to admit that the pajama fashion looked quite nice just from the prop icon. Onesie pajamas. There's also a little bear hood on the back, all in brown. It looks quite nice, giving off a laid-back and warm feeling, much like a cozy man at home on a winter's day. But even so, Chen Yi expressionlessly stuffed the prop into the Tuberculosis Rabbit backpack, to store it for now or to see if it could be sold later for some points or something. He would absolutely, definitely, and resolutely not walk down the street wearing a brown teddy bear onesie. Not a chance. No matter how powerful the fashion set effects were, he would not allow himself to be seen in public in such attire, as it would be an affront to his image. The remaining rewards were the title rewards. Title name, Quaffo Chasing the Sunday. Title level, yellow. Title effect, after wearing this title, every time you say the word sun, the surrounding area within 100 meters will be instantly illuminated. Obtaining method, stay under the sun for 24 consecutive hours. Chen Yi thoughtfully nodded. This title was of no use to him, but it might be quite useful for people living in the Arctic Circle. People living in the Arctic Circle should easily obtain this title. The Arctic Circle not only has the midnight sun but also polar night. With this title, when the Arctic Circle falls into polar night, the local residents only need to have several people constantly shout sun, sun, sun on the rooftops, and they can turn the polar night into daylight. Perhaps in the future, this might even lead to a new profession. Lamplighter. Working 9 to 5, just like a civil servant. Indeed, a new era always gives rise to new job positions. As for the other title effect, it's a bit odd. Whether to mention it or not. Such a provocative title, worn atop one's head, isn't it a bit too much of a hate magnet? Chapter 48. Husband, the name hasn't moved, he must have fallen asleep. The name of this title sure feels provocative, and the title effect seems even more so. Title name, just this? Laughable. Title level, red. Title effect, you can summon a mouthy phantom shadow that lasts for 30 minutes, which uses all kinds of filthy language to taunt the player or boss in front of you. If taunting a boss, then the boss will definitely target you first for an attack. After use, it goes into a 24-hour cooldown. Obtaining method, survive 24 hours when a boss from another time and space is pursuing you. After thinking for a while, Chen Yi silently nodded. This title could still be quite useful in certain situations. However, he seemed to have a good grasp on the ranking system for titles now. The hierarchy of title levels from low to high goes as follows. white, green, blue, yellow, purple, red, black, rainbow. A red level title already counts as one of the strongest. It is clear that the classification of a title's level is not based on the effects of the title but based on the rarity of how one obtains it. Besides these two titles, there is also the title he bought from the little elk. Title name, Assisting Lonely Elders. By now, he had nearly 11 titles. Fatal Strike, Invincible Under the Heavens, Violators, Annihilate 9 Clans, Nemesis of the Insect Race, Peerless Under the Sky, Yay, We've Got a Car. Your cars are all super weak. Lucky Child of the God of Love, Quaffo Chasing the Sun. Just this? Laughable. Assisting Lonely Elders. 11 titles, all stacked on top of his head, were indeed quite intimidating. The height of a title was about 40 centimeters, so all 11 titles together were over 4 meters tall, taller than he was. It is worth mentioning that the title always floated above him, meaning that even if he bent over to tie his shoelaces or did a handstand, the title would still be directly above him. It wouldn't be that bending over made the title smack into someone's face, or that doing a handstand would push the title into the ground. Tuberculosis Rabbit now also had 3 titles above his head. Quaffo Chasing the Sun, Just This? Laughable. Assisting Lonely Elders. What to say? Tuberculosis Rabbit sighed with a somber expression, tightened his belt, and looked up at the titles towering 4 meters high above Yi's head. We must never have enemies in the future. Otherwise, it's just too eye-catching, practically broadcasting our location in real time. All right then. Chen Yi glanced around and had no intention of staying long. Let's head home first. Okie dokie. One day later, Chen Yi and the group made their leisurely way back to Yancheng, and it was already the 24th of May. It's getting dark already. Tuberculosis Rabbit looked up at the sky. Finally, I can have a good sleep. The sleigh is great and all, but it's somewhat uncomfortable to sleep on. Speaking of which, next time we upgrade it, can we add another bed? Chen Yi didn't reply. Instead, he parked the sleigh on the rooftop of their apartment building and looked at the global vehicle leaderboard. Top player, Chen Yi. Vehicle name, Mechanical Moose Christmas Sleigh. Vehicle level, sea level. Vehicle rating, 4,630. Originally, his vehicle's basic score was only 1,000, but after this haphazard modification, it had reached a rating of 4,630, a full 3,630 points higher. He glanced at the elk sprawled on the rooftop not far away, panting aimlessly with a dazed look in its eyes, and his mouth twitched slightly without saying anything. Can this still be called a mechanical elk? Can the name of this vehicle be changed? Afterward, he looked toward the 7th place on the global vehicle leaderboard. Ranked 7th player, Zhou Ziqiang. Vehicle name, Bright Brand Pedal Bicycle. Vehicle level, E-Class. Vehicle rating, 782. If he wasn't mistaken, didn't this bicycle have a basic score of only 10 points? How have you modified a bicycle with a basic score of just 10 points into one with a rating of 782? What did you do to this bicycle? He shook his head, didn't say anything more, and headed toward his own house. In the last few days, he was indeed a bit tired. Wash up, go to sleep. Just as he had barely fallen asleep, he suddenly heard a voice by his ear. Ding! The global event Extraterrestrial Invader has officially ended, beginning the reward settlement. The global kill points leaderboard begins the official settlement. Ranked 1st, Zhou Ziqiang. Ranked 7th, Chen Yi. All players, please spend your kill points at the event marketplace within 24 hours. Failure to do so will be considered a voluntary forfeiture. 7th. Chen Yi looked at the global kill rankings in front of him with slight surprise. He remembered that this morning, he was ranked 1st. With more than 1 million kill points, a comfortable lead in 1st place. Unexpectedly, in just one day's time, he was knocked down the ranks. Zhou Ziqiang's kill points reached more than 2 million, almost touching 3 million, more than double his total. Can so many insect race monsters be killed in just one day? Chen Yi shook his head and thought no more, probably it was some even more perverted prop. In this world now, a beggar you see one second could suddenly start a killing spree the next, and it wouldn't be surprising. Opportunities are everywhere. But let's think about all this tomorrow. Now it's time to sleep. Tuberculosis Rabbit's sleep talking started as usual. And Chen Yi, now somewhat accustomed to it, slowly closed his eyes, thankful that Tuberculosis Rabbit only talked in his sleep and didn't sleepwalk. Otherwise, with that charged strike he's been holding back for who knows how long. If it got unwittingly unleashed by Tuberculosis Rabbit during sleepwalking, now that would be a big problem. Shortly after Chen Yi fell asleep, the young couple living above Chen Yi, upon seeing the title that had emerged from the floor and hadn't moved for a while, began to whisper to each other. "Honey, the title isn't moving. He must be asleep," the woman said. "Then, shall we continue?" the husband asked. Yet. Look, there are a few more titles, and they're getting higher. I bet in a few days, they'll go through our floor and poke up to the upper story." "Let's not worry about that for now," the husband said. The man, somewhat urgently, removed his socks and tossed them aside. "Let's take care of some important business first. Be gentle." 10 minutes later, the man suddenly stiffened, took a deep breath, and just as he was about to collapse into sleep, he noticed the title behind him staring at him. "Is that all? Laughable." The bright title seemed to mock him openly. The man's face immediately darkened, and after a moment's gritting of his teeth, he climbed out of bed once more. Again. Chapter 49. Does your coffee shop only have freshly ground coffee? A night quickly passed by. Chen Yi yawned and climbed out of bed, casually finished his ablutions, and then leaned on the windowsill with a cigarette in his mouth, looking down at the scene outside. Today was already May 25th. Time flew by. In a few more days, it would be 2 full months since this game had arrived. There was some good news worth celebrating. In a few days, the rule that required everyone to speak 1,000 sentences a day would be going offline. There was also bad news. The removal of the rule wouldn't affect the Tuberculosis Rabbit's verbosity. From this angle, the rickshaw business on the streets didn't seem very good. After all, not many people were willing to spend their preciously acquired points to enjoy such a service. Most would rather tire out their own legs. On the other hand, the vegetable shops seemed to be doing well, since everyone still needed to eat. So far, all the points in everyone's hands were essentially obtained from the government. Like cleaners, construction workers outside the city, law enforcement officers, factory workers, and so on. Many positions could acquire points from the government. Hey, Yi! At the same time, the Tuberculosis Rabbit, who had also finished washing up, took a spiced carrot out of his pocket, crunched into it, and looked up at the residents below. Where does the government get so many points to distribute to these people? The sources for obtaining points are basically those few, right? Complete daily missions, then there's killing monsters and exchanging kill points for points. Aside from that, are there any other sources for getting points? Even if the government killed a massive number of insect race monsters and exchanged them for a large number of points, that still wouldn't be enough for a few days' distribution, right? I've heard that the factories outside the city that specialize in producing crossbow arrows and other iron tools have started to recruit on a large scale, cranking up production. The amount of points distributed in a single day isn't small. If you ask me, the current phenomenon of using points as a circulating currency must still be something the government is pushing behind the scenes, right? After all, if the government were to forcefully decree that cash must be used as the circulating currency, there should at least be a grace period. Given the current situation, the government must be tight on points too, since they're not something that can just be printed off by machines on a whim. I have no clue. Chen Yi furrowed his brow and pondered for a moment before shaking his head. Perhaps the nation has some source of points that we don't know about, and there might be some deep meaning behind their push to quickly popularize points as a circulating currency. There's no need to think about it, it's beyond our understanding. After all. He suddenly thought of something, looking thoughtfully at the badge in his hand. It was a pass that had come out of Tai Chui's treasure chest, officially named the Wilderness Access Badge. It could be used to go to the wilderness 3 times. The item's effect stated that when the wilderness map was opened, players who held this item could enter the wilderness without hindrance. But so far, he had no idea where this wilderness map was. No hints whatsoever. There was also no information about it on the personal panel map. Perhaps, the government's reserve of points came from a certain map, something like the existence of a pass? Otherwise, it was hard to explain where this continuous and large reserve of points came from. And why the government didn't keep these points for themselves but instead used this form of employment, settling accounts with points. Chen Yi shook his head and decided not to think about these things anymore, as they were beyond his level of understanding. It was better not to ponder over them. Let's go, let's head downstairs to grab something to eat first. Hot coffee coming up. Outside, the streets were still bustling, seemingly no different than any other day. Although not many shops were open, there were still a few scattered businesses with their doors ajar. And not far away, a cafe was energetically hawking its wares. Unlike the typical exquisite decor inside most cafes, this one was clearly more rudimentary, with just a table set up at the entrance and nothing but a price list on top of it. Freshly ground coffee coming up, only 10,000 yuan a cup. The man's hawking was loud, and there was a long line of people at the door. The reason was simple. Because this was one of the few shops that still accepted cash. Everyone knew that soon cash would be worthless. Even though the price was far beyond that of normal coffee, no one cared. It wouldn't be long before this cash would be mere waste paper. The kind that lies on the ground no one bothers to pick up. A flash of surprise crossed Tuberculosis Rabbit's eyes, and he couldn't help but walk towards the cafe, paying with cash? That's pretty interesting. Standing in front of the table, Tuberculosis Rabbit looked curiously at the price list, then at the man behind the table. Do you only have freshly ground coffee? No other varieties? No. The man looked up and glanced at the title above Chen Yi's head that resembled a telephone pole, his face breaking into a smile as he cheerfully said, real good coffee always comes with nothing added. Those toppings like milk foam are just for inferior coffees. Why not try our freshly ground coffee? It's definitely tasty. And it's cash only, so why not buy a few cups to try? You won't lose out, right? If you want, I can make a few cups for you right now. Rest assured, the taste will definitely not disappoint you. Tuberculosis Rabbit stared expressionlessly at the cafe that didn't allow entry and the price list that only offered freshly ground coffee. For some reason, he suddenly felt an extreme sense of familiarity. This sense of familiarity evoked a possible realization growing within him. Yi. Chen Yi also looked at the man with a complex expression, tilting his head towards the crowd nearby who had just bought their coffee and were squatting to the side, slowly savoring their cups. He was momentarily at a loss for words. Such a swindler. Taking a deep breath and with a serious look, Tuberculosis Rabbit stared at the man and said word by word, I have to tell them that the coffee they're drinking is produced using your skill for a cup of coffee. The words were not yet finished. Instantly, the man's face changed and he covered Tuberculosis Rabbit's mouth with his hand. He quickly called someone over to guard the spot and promptly ushered Tuberculosis Rabbit and his companion into the cafe. Standing behind the curtain, he spoke with a bitter expression. Fellows, let's do it this way, according to rules of the Martinique. How about I give you two some hush money? Name your price. No need. Chen Yi shook his head, glanced around the shop at the 20 or 30 men standing motionless with cups in their hands, grinding coffee non-stop, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. After a moment, he regained his composure and spoke complexly. Just answer two questions. First, why are you collecting cash? Second, where did you get so many of the same skill? The E-level skill, a cup of coffee, though of a lower grade, getting dozens of that skill wouldn't be easy, right? Chapter 50. Did that title just flash brightly? This. The man in front of them stammered, glanced at the group of men queuing up to buy coffee outside the shop, and then raised his head to scan the string of titles piercing through the ceiling above Chen Yi's head, his voice trembling slightly with a crying tone. Look, brother, I really don't want to say it. But I'm scared you'll just kill me right on the spot. What should I do? Especially with the current public order not being very good, and someone like you, brother, with titles bursting through the roof, I simply can't afford to offend. But I really don't want to say it. Tisk. Tuberculosis Rabbit took out a watermelon-flavored carrot from his bosom with a look of resignation, stuffed it into his mouth, and regarded the man in front of him with some curiosity. Do you want to listen to what you're actually saying? It's rare to see someone this honest. So. Tuberculosis Rabbit beckoned with his hand, pulled out a claw knife from his chest, gestured with it a few times, then looked seriously at the man. Have you made your choice? Yes. The man nodded solemnly, stepped aside and pointed to a room not far away. Right this way, please. Chen Yi nodded slightly, seemingly nonchalantly took out the Christmas cane from his backpack, leaned on it, and eyed the room not too far off. He could see through one layer of barrier. There were no traps behind the wall. Only then did he slightly relax and followed the man forward, taking out the cigarette prop that would give him invincible frames from his backpack and putting it in his mouth for safety's sake. And had Tuberculosis Rabbit follow behind him. It was indeed strange, not knowing how the cane's ability to see through one layer of barrier was determined. Normally speaking, a wall wouldn't have just one layer of barrier. But it was indeed judged as a single barrier. Inside the room. After pouring a glass of mineral water for both Chen Yi and himself, the man hesitated for a moment before opening his mouth. Brother, you were asking why I only accept cash, right? I could say, let's all make a fortune together. But we better not let too many people know, or else everyone's interests would be damaged, right? You say. Chen Yi leaned back in his chair, placed the cane across his lap, took the Macai Karo flavored carrot Tuberculosis Rabbit handed him and began to crunch on it. Tastes not bad. Right. Tuberculosis Rabbit triumphantly shook the feed box from Santa Claus in his bosom, laughing contentedly. I can eat 10 of these a day, and the flavors are quite unique. Phew. The man looked oddly at the two men in front of him. If it wasn't for the glaring titles above their heads that told him these were the two who had slaughtered the insect race monsters outside Yanshanj, judging by their conversation, they really didn't seem like any sort of experts. He took a deep breath, calmed himself, and then began to explain. Everything that happened these last 2 months, you both have seen. A game descended. The team behind it calls itself the Snow Sea Project Team, and it has disrupted the original order on Blue Star, making many people start to use various methods to collect points. Everything is looking more and more like a domestic web game, including titles, boss systems, skill systems, item systems, and so on. But, didn't you notice what key system a domestic web game typically has is missing? The pay-to-win system. At this point, the man couldn't help getting excited, flailing his arms around as he laid out his vision. A web game without a pay-to-win system is like the West without Jerusalem. So, I boldly predict. The June version update will definitely introduce a microtransaction system. Since there will be microtransactions, what will we use to recharge points? Gold? Jewels? Or cash? My guess is gold and cash. One is a long-term currency, the other is a current short-term currency, and I'm intentionally collecting both, regardless of which it is. When the June version update arrives and the microtransaction system becomes available, I will be able to get a lot of points from it. Even, ascend to godhood through microtransactions. The man was clearly infected by the vision in his mind, his tone growing more and more excited as he stood up. Now those companies that were once glorious are all collecting points, treating cash as worthless. But they don't know. This cash, once the microtransaction system arrives, will become an invaluable weapon. The Tuberculosis Rabbit, who had been sitting off to the side with legs crossed enjoying the scene, was momentarily lost after hearing this. After forcefully swallowing the last bite of carrot, he shakily lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth. He exhaled a long puff of smoke. As he slowly sank into thought amidst the pale blue smoke, after a moment, he suddenly slapped the table. Damn! That makes sense. As soon as the words fell, a blinding white light suddenly flashed from the Aquafa Chasing the Sun title above the Tuberculosis Rabbit's head, illuminating every dark corner of the room, far more effective than any shadowless lamp. What's this? Continue your journey with Empire. The man who was caught off guard rubbed his slightly sore eyes and took a while to react. He then looked at Tuberculosis Rabbit and murmured towards the title above his head that had just flashed brightly. Did that title just flash brightly? Oh. Tuberculosis Rabbit nodded, waved his hand nonchalantly, and said casually, seems like it. A title that doesn't flash is like a Civic that doesn't flash, it's not presentable. Forget it, that's not important. Yi, what do you think of this brother's speculation? Feels like there's something to it. Let me think. Chen Yi rested his chin in one hand and leaned back in his chair without speaking, but furrowed his brow and fell into deep thought. This man's speculation, it seems not unfounded. Microtransaction system. A web game should indeed have a microtransaction system, and it's quite possible that it will appear in June's version update. But he does not agree with the idea of using cash for microtransactions. Cash, as long as you don't consider financial affairs, is something you can print at will with printing machines. How much could it possibly cost? If it really were cash for microtransactions, then the leaderboard would overflow with max-level players by the next day. But, if it's gold, then perhaps there's some possibility? Some currency without much inflation and yet a common consensus? It can't be BTC, can it? Chen Yi's mouth twitched slightly without speaking. He could imagine that sight in the future. It might really be the power of faith brought by long-term holding, a relic of the old celebrations from the devoted disciples of BTC. Then he exhaled lightly. I got it. Second question, where did you get that E-grade skill for making coffee? The speculation about microtransactions planted a seed in his heart. But now wasn't the time to consider it.